Watch on mobile devices or the big screen, all for free. No subscription required. Download Beely now.
You know, I've been around for a while. Met some interesting people. Done some crazy things. So you just might think that there's not much that can take me by surprise. You'd be wrong. The world is full of stories, science, and things that amaze and confound me. Every single day, incredible mysteries that keep me awake at night. Some I can answer. Others just defy logic.
Do ghosts exist? Should we fear the paranormal? In California, a woman is terrorized by an invisible attacker. Is she the victim of a genuine haunting?
Forget the silly movies that are out there. This is real.
In New England, a mother undergoes a violent transformation. Has she been possessed by a demon?
It'll make a cold chill go up your spine.
And a British teenager claims to see ghosts. Does she have the gift?
Like the fear, it was uncontrollable.
Yeah. It's a weird world, and I love it. Have you ever seen a ghost? Over 90 million North Americans claim to have done just that, and 40 million others say they have physically experienced a paranormal event. Many of these events are easily explained, but some are not only weird and inexplicable, most disturbing of all, they seem to be evidence of pure evil. Do ghosts exist? And what are they anyway? Is the paranormal something we should fear? Or is it simply, hogwash?
August 8th, 1989. Barry Taff, one of the world's leading paranormal investigators, responds to the call of a distressed woman in San Pedro, California. He brings along a colleague, photographer Jeff Wheatcraft.
After 5,000 cases, you go out expecting nothing to happen. And most of the time, that's exactly what does occur. Nothing.
The terrified woman is Jackie Hernandez, a single mother who claims that someone or something has turned her home into a living hell.
She reported apparitions of an old man, strange lights. Somebody tried to smother her a couple times. Things were flying at her. It was extraordinary.
But perhaps most chilling, on several occasions, Jackie claims to have seen a corpse in her son's bed. Intrigued, the ghost hunters decide to look around.
I have this attitude where I'm very skeptical because you know that a lot of people embellish and exaggerate and misrepresent what's going on.
But in Jackie's house, they find something unexpected and very weird.
We were taking pictures all over the house, and we saw this strange liquid, I don't know what, a viscous liquid dripping out of a wall.
Unable to explain the weird slime, Taff is now convinced Jackie is not faking anything and real paranormal activity is occurring in her home. They take samples and promise to return, but just 3 days later, another call. This time, it's an emergency. Whatever is in Jackie's house is on a rampage. The physical attacks have become so violent and severe, she fears for her life.
I was unavailable because my father had a heart attack, so they were there without me.
Jackie reports the evil entity is now in her attic. it has been tormenting her with strange lights and ear-shattering banging. Jeff and Gary decide to investigate. Nothing could prepare them for what they find.
They hear, oh, like a yell or a moan, and Gary turned back to see what happened to Jeff, and he couldn't see. It was too dark in the attic.
Despite his terror, Gary snaps some photos in the darkness. What they reveal will haunt them forever.
You can see that Jeff, a 6'2" man, about 215 pounds, something has wrapped itself around his neck, and it's pulling him up against the rafter. And yet, there was no one there. It was Jeff and Gary. And he cut him down. He had a rope burn in his neck. It would have killed him. The question is, there was no one else there, so what? Try to kill him? How and why?
Something had tried to murder Jeff Wheatcraft. The investigators leave the house only to make another chilling discovery. The forensic lab report on the ooze from Jackie's walls is in.
The conclusion was it was human blood plasma. That's something you will lose sleep over, literally. Forget the silly movies that are out there. This is real.
Now certain they are dealing with an evil, homicidal phenomenon that tell Jackie to get out and never come back. What was in Jackie Hernandez's house, and was it out to kill? Jackie's story became known as the San Pedro haunting, one of the most mysterious paranormal events in history. But what really happened? Javier Ortega is a paranormal researcher. He has no doubt.
The Jackie Hernandez case is a very extreme case of a haunting. If somebody dared me to go in the house, I wouldn't set foot in there.
Haunting. We've all heard of it. But what does it really mean?
In a haunting, it's usually the spirit of a deceased person, the homeowner that passed away in that house, and they were so attached to a physical object or location that they come back.
Was Jackie's house haunted by someone who had died there? Incredibly, the investigation uncovered something bizarre.
During the investigation of the Jackie Hernandez case, she reported that her and some friends were playing with the Ouija board, and they were able to talk with the spirit in the house. And the spirit had told them that he was a Marine that was murdered. So they went out and they did some research, and they found out that there was a Marine named Herman Hendrickson who was found dead in 1930.
Was the spirit of a murdered Marine responsible for the attacks on Jackie and Wheatcraft? Does a haunting explain the other things she experienced?
A lot of the things that were reported were apparitions, you know, whether it was a disembodied head floating in the attic or a corpse-like old man sitting in her child's bed. She also reported seeing strange lights. They were described as globs of luminous light. Free-floating globs of light have been reported in haunted places as well.
But for Ortega, most compelling evidence of a haunting is that mysterious goo Barry and Jeff found oozing from Jackie's walls.
I mean, it just sounds so bizarre, you know, that you have human blood plasma oozing from the walls. And when they checked, there wasn't any device that, you know, that was emitting this substance. So that, to me, it has to be one of the most compelling cases in the paranormal.
Was the Marine so angry about being murdered that he bled through Jackie's walls? Incredibly, Ortega thinks Jackie wasn't the only victim.
When Jackie Hernandez left the premise, people who inhabited that home have also reported strange activities. They reported objects being moved around, pots and pans being moved around, and they reported being touched by unseen forces. When you have a lot of physical activity in a supposed haunted location, it tends to speak volumes for the amount of energy that resides in that home. And we don't know, as a paranormal researchers, we don't know if it's due to psychokinetic forces or if it's due to location hauntings. If you have the same reports happening year after year on the same location when there's different tenants, it usually tends to point towards it being a location haunting.
What an incredible story. You know, I mean, strange things happen around my house too, but once I say I'm sorry, everything's forgiven. But human blood? Dripping from walls and a spirit that is so angry it tries to kill you? I mean, who are they going to call? Ghostbusters? I've always wanted to say that.
Was Jackie Hernandez the victim of a haunting? Or was it something else?
It does not appear that the house would fit the classic haunting.
A terrified woman reports extreme paranormal events in her home. Weird lights, strange noises, even physical attacks. Did Jackie Hernandez live in a haunted house?
It does not appear that the house would fit the classic haunting.
Lloyd Auerbach is a paranormal investigator. He believes the answer isn't ghosts at all.
Knowing what I know about the Jackie Hernandez case, it seemed that she herself was a poltergeist agent.
Poltergeist? Isn't that just a hyperactive ghost? Or is there a difference?
What we learned in the last 100 years is that these things relate typically not to ghost sightings, not to hauntings per se, not to a place being haunted, but to a person, an individual in the situation who is typically stressed or otherwise put upon. There's possibly epileptic or having epileptic type activity. It's about a third perhaps of the cases. And the expression, instead of by an entity, is by the entity in the body. It's by a person's unconscious blowing off steam or having a seizure, essentially. It's kind of like a seizure in some of these people as well. But it's not a ghost-related situation. If you go on the web and look at a lot of ghost hunting sites, you'll see poltergeist is a particular type of ghost, mischievous spirit. Most of the folks who are on the web have no background in parapsychology. They don't know the literature for the last 100 or so years. They don't know how we've actually come to these conclusions, or they don't know how the fact that we can actually stop these cases, whereas it's a little bit harder when you have a reported ghost instance or a haunting to deal with that.
Many now believe poltergeists are not ghosts, but a manifestation of something called psychokinesis.
We call it PK for short, and it's the idea that the mind can directly interact or affect matter and energy. We typically think of it in the paranormal world as affecting things outside your body, whether it be moving objects, what people often call telekinesis, or bending metal, or even healing.
Was Jackie Hernandez herself causing the weird phenomenon in her own house? If so, why? And for that matter, how?
Certain people, their unconscious minds let loose. I mean, we see people who are stressed out, who are put upon in society, in really expressing that stress in different ways. Some people get enraged and they break things. Some people shoot people. Some people keep it bottled up, and it can explode in kind of a different direction for certain individuals, which is a psychokinetic direction. And we call those situations where they're stressed, think of it as an unconscious temper tantrum. It's happening outside themselves and just starts throwing things around, probably like they'd like to do if they actually physically could do it. But by having their unconscious throw things around, who's going to get blamed? The invisible force, the invisible ghost, certainly not the person who's stressed out. When we talk about the stress involved in these PK events, which are often called poltergeist cases, we're not talking about typical stress of, just day-to-day stress, sitting in traffic, being frustrated because your computer couldn't work, which may actually be related back to the PK. Those kinds of stresses do show in small ways sometimes, but they can, again, come out in a lot of different ways. For example, road rage, or people just screaming at the driver across the way without acting on it. You release that stress. People have other ways of doing it. In poltergeist cases, the stresses tend to be very psychologically oriented in most of these cases. So they can be related to deep-seated issues around the family or even around the working conditions. They are typically not expressed in other ways, so there's no outlet for most of these people. In other conditions, these would be the kids or the adults who are going to act out in a very bad way, whether it be breaking things or doing something else, typically. So we have a different kind of stress level involved, but it can be very, very much under the surface. I had a case, for example, years ago, where the woman was recovering memories of her father abusing her as a child. And that caused significant stress, especially as she talked to a therapist about it. And that was extended out to a poltergeist incident. By talking to her, you wouldn't know. I mean, there's just no way you'd see that stress was there. And it was a completely different kind of stress than we think of just being frustrated by day-to-day activity.
Was Jackie's unconscious mind throwing a temper tantrum? And if so, why? It could be due to the fact she was experiencing emotional issues at the time following a difficult divorce.
There was enough going on in her life and, frankly, enough psychological issues that would indicate that she was responsible for most of the phenomena that was happening. In most poltergeist cases, people rarely ever think of themselves as the agent.
According to Auerbach, the most compelling argument that Jackie was both the victim and the problem is what happened when she moved 600 kilometers away. Incredibly, the vicious paranormal attacks on her continued.
In poltergeist cases, when people move, the phenomena follows them because it's coming from them. And that also happened in that particular case.
But if Jackie was her own poltergeist, how is it that the new tenants also reported paranormal attacks?
We've had cases where people have heard about the case and have gone home, and because they're so freaked out by the situation, they start witnessing things. That has happened, so you can think of it almost like a contagious idea. It is possible that it was a haunted house. It is possible there was an entity there. We can't completely exclude that, but it best fit the poltergeist model.
Could it be that Jackie herself was responsible for the weird goings-on? Or were they the result of an altogether different kind of bad vibe? Professor John Huntington believes the Jackie Hernandez case can be explained by undetectable audio waves known as infrasound.
Sound is just the vibration in air pressure. That's how we perceive it, and that's how it gets into your ear. Infrasound is below the range that we can hear as an audible sound, but we're still being affected by the sound wave is still impinging on our bodies. In fact, right now in the room, we have a pretty loud 19 hertz, 19 cycle per second infrasound wave going, but it's not really audible as a sound, and it's quite a bit louder than the speech, the level of the speech that I'm talking at right now. But it's still there, and it's still affecting us. It's still pressurizing the air that I'm breathing, that I'm speaking.
Human ears can't detect ultra-low frequencies. If it's below 20 hertz, you can't hear it.
Your body makes lots of sounds down at very low frequencies, such as your heartbeat, the movement of your blood, breath noise coming in and out of your body. If we could hear all that, it would drive us crazy. But we're still being affected by it. The sound wave is still impinging on our body.
But other than our own bodies, what might cause these low frequencies?
Man-made sources of infrasound could be anything from a piece of air handling equipment in a building, anything like a train, a truck, anything that's big stuff that's moving could generate these very low frequency sounds.
Incredibly, Huntington believes low-frequency sound waves could have caused Jackie Hernandez's unpleasant experiences.
So in addition to things like headaches and nausea being caused by exposure to infrasound, there have been some reports of feeling a presence or some sort of hallucination or feeling like strange things are going on in the room. A lot of that was documented by two researchers at Coventry University, Tandy and Lawrence, in the late 90s. They were working in a space, sort of an underground space as I understand it, and they had all kinds of just strange experiences. People would think that somebody was standing next to them, and when there wasn't anybody in the room, they'd be feeling alone and felt like there was a presence in the room, and there wasn't anybody else there. All kinds of strange experiences happening in this one space. And this would build up, of course, anxiety, having these sort of constant sort of strange experiences. And then one of the researchers brought a fencing foil into the room to work on it, clamped it into a vise, and it started moving on its own. And it was sort of flopping up and down at both ends where it wasn't secured in the vise. That led the Tandy and Lawrence to research this, and they ended up doing some acoustical measurements in the room and found that a piece of air handling equipment was causing a very loud 19 cycle per second infrasound sound wave in the room. And in addition, the physical geometry of the space was causing that sound wave to build up in certain locations in the lab. And then as soon as they turned the HVAC equipment off, or actually decoupled that piece of equipment from the mounting equipment where it was transmitting, all the strange experiences went away.
Can infrasound exposure mimic the experience of a haunting?
And infrasound could possibly cause something like a hallucination or an apparition or some other things like that based on the vibration of the sound wave actually affecting the eye. The eye itself could resonate or get a very strong sort of vibration, and that could cause blurring of vision or possible issues around the periphery of the vision. Those things coupled with already being in sort of a spooky location, being on edge by the infrasound, could certainly cause some sort of ghostly experiences.
Could Huntington's theory be correct? Does the paranormal activity witnessed in San Pedro have a rational explanation? And does it explain human plasma oozing from the wall? Was Jackie's home haunted, or was she her own poltergeist? Whatever the answer, this story is certainly weird. Or what? A Connecticut housewife is tortured from within. Has she been possessed by an evil spirit?
Demons like to attack good people.
Many of us have experienced events that we would call paranormal, but in fact are just things that are harmless and easily explained. But what is the paranormal? And does it exist? Even the name is a little, well, weird and scary. Here's the way it's described in the dictionary. Paranormal, the claimed occurrence of an event without scientific explanation. As psychokinesis, extrasensory perception of other purportedly supernatural phenomena. All right, guys, come on, that's it. You can fool some. Oh boy, oh boy. But some people experience paranormal events that are real. So real, in fact, they're deadly. Weird. Or what?
History professor John Kerner studies reports of paranormal activity. None have haunted him more than the story of Patricia Redding.
By all accounts, she was a good person. I mean, there's nothing you can see in her past that would indicate why this happens to her.
In 1992, Patricia's life took a terrifying turn. Doing chores around her home in Litchfield, Connecticut, she suddenly hears a terrifying voice.
Worship Satan.
She felt what she thought was an evil presence that was around her. There was nothing that could explain this.
Patricia tries to brush it off, but the eerie voice won't stop, ever.
Honor Satan.
It's the beginning of a horrifying ordeal.
Stop!
The situation got much, much worse. Pet had a number of things that were happening to her that were very unusual. There were bite marks on the back of her neck, bruises on the back of her body, things she could not do by herself.
What could be inflicting Patricia's vicious bruises and other injuries? It's a frightening and bizarre mystery. Devastated and disturbed, she seeks help.
The family took Patricia Redding to the hospital, to local doctors. They ruled out all the conditions that could possibly be affecting her.
With no medical explanation, Patricia resorts to hoping her problems will simply go away.
But then things started getting much worse after that. She was knocked over horribly. She did not know what is happening.
Again and again, a seemingly evil presence hurls her into the wall.
These are things that never could happen to Pat Redding in a normal situation. She is not herself. She's becoming someone else.
Fearing for her safety, Patricia has only one place to turn.
At that point, the Catholic Church got involved.
Patricia's bishop takes her claims seriously. After an examination, he reaches an incredible conclusion.
They make the diagnosis, yes, she is possessed. Demons like to attack good people.
There's only one solution, an ancient ritual as old as the church itself. The bishop decides he will perform an exorcism.
He called upon the demon to reveal himself and say who you are, reveal yourself in the name of Jesus Christ. Almost every religion really believes in evil in some form or another. But the difference with the Catholic Church is that the Catholic Church believes evil is actually a physical manifestation in this world. It's not just a concept.
At first, the demon stays hidden, but not for long.
She was speaking in a language that she could not speak in normally, trying to insult the priest, insult his family, things that she never would have done on her own. These are pretty clear signs you're dealing with an evil entity inside the person's body.
Having forced the demon into the open, the real battle begins.
Things like holy objects, this often can anger the demon. These are tools in a war that can cause them to be so upset. The words of Christ makes them so angry. So it has to be said over and over again. It's a war of attrition.
The battle rages for hours. At long last, something breaks.
Demons, they get so upset they just can't take this any longer, and they'll go somewhere else. They'll go bother somebody else.
The exhausting battle ends with the demons on the run. But before long, they're back.
Evil is real. It can affect someone in some horrible ways.
Sadly, Patricia runs out of time. After 16 exorcisms, in 2005 she dies of cancer, believed to be caused by her demons. Incredibly, Patricia's story is far from the only one. An estimated 15,000 exorcisms are performed each year. Can evil really live inside us? Or is there some other way to explain demonic possession? Christopher Rossick is a psychologist. He says he knows exactly what happened to Patricia Redding.
Coming from a religious perspective, you might assume that this must be a demonic presence. But as a psychologist, my diagnosis would be dissociative identity disorder.
Better known as a split personality, dissociative identity disorder is when two or more personalities inhabit one mind. An abusive childhood can sometimes cause such a psychological break. One personality becomes the happy face, the person the world sees. The other deals with all the hidden pain, shame, and suffering.
The primary personality is unaware of the other personality. They may hear voices and have these sort of signs, but they don't know what it's about.
Were the demonic voices Patricia heard really the screams of a tortured second personality? Could it have even tried to hurt her?
I had a patient who would end up in a graveyard with a blade in her hand and having cut her arm.
Is a self-destructive alter ego responsible for Patricia's injuries? Can psychology explain the power of an exorcism?
After the exorcism, the individual experiences complete and sudden remission of their symptoms. And of course, that's considered proof positive that the demon has been removed. An alternative way of looking at that, however, is that the prayer, the ritual is in fact just served to rearrange these separate identities such that they have receded from the host's awareness. They don't hear the voice anymore. Then what I experience happen with some patients is that maybe weeks or months later, the voices come back. And then they think, well, you know, I must have invited it back, or something's wrong with me, I'm really evil. And so that's just to say that that experience of the sudden symptom relief after an exorcism is not a clear indicator that there was a demonic presence that was expelled at that point. Everything I'm saying here is in no way meant to malign the value of religious, spiritual care. But there are some psychological ways of understanding these experiences that really should be taken into account.
Demonic possession. Ordinary people suddenly possessed by nasty entities. Ring a bell? Ah, you know, I've seen all the movies. Omen, 1, 2, 3, The Exorcist, a lot. And guess what? Not only do they not scare me, but I don't believe them. I mean, just because it gets a little stormy doesn't mean the devil is on his way to take over your soul, does it? Yeah, as for all that other ridiculous stuff like twisting heads, speaking in strange tongues. Is demonic possession all in our heads? Or is there a more frightening answer?
What Satan can do is invade human bodies.
A Connecticut woman appears to have been possessed by an evil demon. Could she be suffering from a split personality? Or is the explanation far more terrifying? Reverend Bob Larson is not your average man of God.
I am, among other things, an exorcist.
Larson has studied Patricia Redding's possession and is convinced it was real.
There are those who would like to have the public believe that demonic possession is rare. I can tell you, it's not rare. It'll make a cold chill go up your spine.
Are demons really all around us? Are they trying to take over the bodies of innocent humans?
The Bible teaches that when Satan was cast out of heaven, a third of the angels involved in that insurrection were cast out with him.
According to the book of Revelation, when Satan lost his war with God, he and his followers were banished to the spirit realm on earth.
Satan is now an invisible spirit being. Satan can't pull the trigger of a gun, but what Satan can do is invade human bodies, and those people then become the instruments of evil.
Larson believes demonic possession has a firm basis in Scripture. He's also certain that Patricia's condition wasn't a case of split personality.
I deal a lot with multiple personality disorder. I know the difference. When you see the demon have such utter hatred for God and religious objects such as the cross, that aversion means it's something more than psychosis. That's when you know they are possessed.
But there's one thing Larson believes is the ultimate proof of demonic presence.
In the Pat Reading case, she apparently spoke in another language. I've seen this happen thousands and thousands of times. I had a woman speak Chinese one time. I had a fascinating case where a strange language was being spoken and a college professor with a PhD in ancient Semitic languages. He said, I can come up and tell you exactly what the voice was saying. And he did. And the voice was speaking about his possession of the person and how it was determined to destroy them. Now, this was a PhD college professor who was giving testimony to it.
Could these foreign, even forgotten languages prove that Satan is carrying on an age-old war by invading the bodies of humans?
To the skeptics who may not believe in demonic possession, I say, travel with me and meet the thousands of people who have had exorcisms. When you see the smile and the glow on the person's face as they say to you, wow, I didn't know I could feel like this. Something is gone. That's why I do exorcisms.
Are exorcisms ultimate proof that devilish spirits still roam the earth? Could reports of demonic possession be explained by a misunderstood mental illness, or is everyone simply making it up? Whatever the truth, this mystery is most definitely weird. Or what? I don't know about you, but stories of ghosts and the paranormal send shivers up my spine. But that's kind of fun, right? But do spirits or ghosts or whatever they are always have to be evil? Well, aren't there any friendly dead people out there? I hope so. But there's some people who not only enjoy having ghosts around, they can talk to them whenever they like. How? They've got the gift. In just about every way, Faye Jackson is an average teenage girl.
I like to shop and just hang out with my friends.
While Faye's life appears to be ordinary, in truth, she and her family are dealing with something so sensitive, they've chosen to conceal their appearance.
Although it has become part of everyday life for us, it is still at times frightening.
Faye's story began 3 years ago when she was 10.
I was sitting in my bedroom on my own. I could feel a man sitting next to me.
She could feel like an energy, like a presence next to her.
And I could just feel his breath in my ear and it was all warm.
And then she heard him whispering in her ear.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Faye races to her mom.
Like the fear, it was like uncontrollable. It was unexplainable.
The child was absolutely terrified. And I was scared for her, to be honest.
When Lynn takes her daughter back to the room, the man is gone. But Faye is in no doubt as to what she's experienced.
I saw my first ghost.
Terrifyingly, Faye's encounter was just the beginning.
The spirits started regularly visiting me. They'd only come when I was on my own, and when they did, just random spirits would walk into my bedroom.
Faye is haunted by hundreds of ghosts. Sometimes she sees as many as 5 a night.
Sometimes they just want to show her how they died, which is a little bit grim at times, and she's only 13.
The ghosts begin getting bolder.
There was an instant when her bed was shook, which completely terrified me.
I just felt like I was being attacked. It was horrible. It felt really dangerous, and I felt like I was on my own.
That was when I knew we had to do something about it.
At her wit's end, Lynn seeks professional advice.
We got lots of help from local mediums who understood what was happening.
Far from seeing it as something frightening, the mediums tell them Faye's ability to see and connect with the dead is a gift, and a very rare one at that.
They taught Faye techniques that she could use to take more of a control over her gift and to see it as a gift, really.
With the help of psychic mediums, the support of her mother, and lots of hard work, Faye finally mastered her gift.
It's like I have 2 lives. Like I live one life where I'm just a normal girl, and then other times I can talk to spirits. So it's really quite exciting.
I see dead people. That's something else I've always wanted to say, but I can't because I don't. Well, not when I'm sober anyway. But incredibly, it may be because I'm an adult. You see, Faye isn't alone. Millions of other children see dead people too. How? Do they possess a special power, a 6th sense? And is it a gift or a curse? Weird. Or what?
13-year-old Faye Jackson claims she can see ghosts. Do children possess the gift? Who better to ask about children who see ghosts than Karen Good, author of Children Who See Ghosts?
To discover that children see ghosts and talk with ghosts, to me it was exciting.
After more than 25 years researching the special abilities of young minds, Good has reached an incredible conclusion.
Children are more predisposed to see ghosts than adults are, primarily because of their brain power. The sixth sense begins to develop in children between the ages of 18 months all the way up through 5 to 6 years. And the reason is because their brain is going through a tremendous growth spurt.
We've all heard of the sixth sense, but what is it? What does it do that your other five can't?
When I discuss with a parent, for example, what is the sixth sense? I explain it to a parent as being intuitive intelligence. Some people have a heightened intuition, particularly sensitive children. We call them sensitive because they may be sensitive to the feelings of someone who might be ill. Or one child that I'm aware of used to tell me about, he would know a car accident when his mom was driving. He would get nauseated, and it always correlated for him with a nearby car accident. So I think that a sixth sense involves feeling and intuition, and it could involve heightened sensitivities.
But where does this sixth sense come from? Is it a gift only bestowed on some? Remarkably, Good believes it's an ability that's within us all.
The pineal gland is located within the brain, which actually regulates light within our body. I believe the pineal gland can be a doorway to the sixth sense.
But if we all have the ability to access our sixth sense, why do so few children maintain this power into adulthood?
As the hormones change, children go through brainwave shifts, mood shifts, and that's the time logic develops. And children may turn away from their intuition, their feelings. If children have not been encouraged in their imagination, in their conversations, and sixth sense development, it can shut down when cognition sets in.
Do children's growing brains give them a sixth sense? Should a child's ghost sightings be encouraged? Do kids, like Faye, really have the gift?
My initial reaction to reading the article about Faye was, quite honestly, I wasn't impressed.
Psychic Jack Rourke is an expert in parapsychology. Experience has taught him that a far more mundane explanation may be at work, or rather at home.
There is a phenomenon called parentizing, where, in essence, there's a bit of a role reversal, where a child can sometimes become the caretaker of the parent or become the mirror to the parent.
Rourke believes that through parentizing, children can be actively encouraged to say they see ghosts.
The more positive reinforcement a child gets from their parent, that they are special, that they are extra sensitive, that they have special empathic or intuitive abilities, the more the child then believes they're psychic. And I'll give you an example of how this is done. A child wakes up in the middle of the night from a horrible dream and is talking about ghosts, chasing them, things like this. You come in as the parent and say, no, you're wrong, that didn't happen. You lose the ability to comfort the child because they've been made wrong. Now, I go into the room, same scenario, and I say, oh, you saw a ghost, didn't you? Yes. This is how it's done.
But why would a child like Faye go along with the idea of seeing ghosts? What's in it for her?
The specialness of the child in these circumstances gives the child permission to commiserate with the parent. They become their emotional partner. They go to activities together. They may go to certain psychic functions, and this unique relationship becomes a reward to the child. And in order to maintain that closeness with their parent, they have to maintain the psychic identity. For the parent, this also gives them a passive means to control the child. And also, what I've witnessed is a way to slow down their development and prolong their childhood. So this is an interesting thing, one of the things that we look at. Now, why per se a child might have a specific experience? It could be biological, it could be an environmental reason, it could just be an ordinary bad dream.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Are children who see ghosts merely playing out a fantasy with the encouragement of their parents? Is there nothing special about them at all? Does the gift exist in children at all?
A person like Faye may be capable of seeing ghosts because she has some physiological advantage.
Thousands of children across the globe claim they can see dead people.
Can you hear me?
Do they have an extra special sense known as the gift? Paranormal investigator Joshua P. Warren believes there could be a medical explanation for this phenomena.
A person like Faye may be capable of seeing ghosts because she has some physiological advantage in her eyeballs themselves.
Could Faye's eye have powers the rest of ours don't? Warren believes her secret may be that she sees light differently.
Right now, all the data that we have indicates ghosts are more visible in the infrared realm. Some of the best ghost images I've seen have been captured using infrared technology.
Could Faye be seeing ghosts that are all around us? Ghosts that most of us miss because we can't see infrared?
The average person can only see a relatively narrow band of light, from usually around green to red. Faye might be able to see a little bit more than the rest of us.
Scientists call the range of light the visible spectrum, although most of us know it as the colors of the rainbow. But what if Faye was somehow able to literally see what the rest of us can't?
In the human eye, there are two primary types of cells. You've got the rod cells and the cone cells. Rod cells are used for nighttime vision, but they can't see color. Then you have the cone cells, which respond very quickly, and they see color. If Faye has more of those rod or cone cells, especially the cones, that alone might allow her to see a broader range of colors and frequencies than the average person. Her eyes physiologically allow her to peer deeper into the infrared or ultraviolet realms.
Incredibly, Warren also believes the eye might not just explain Faye's story, but also why children, on average, report seeing more ghosts than adults.
As a person ages, the components of the eye become more and more dense. In extreme cases, they can become very cloudy and form a cataract. So the older you get, the less you're able to see when it comes to this band of frequencies. Children are not only able to see a wider range of frequencies, but they also should have an open mind and open awareness. They have not been structured so much yet into a belief system and into a task-driven day-to-day routine that gives us tunnel vision as adults. As children, they still have a wider awareness and perception of what's around them and the willingness to acknowledge honestly what they see.
Could Faye and other children like her really be able to see into the infrared world of ghosts? Does she have a sixth sense? Or is Faye just a needy kid who wanted her mother's attention and approval? We may never know. Weird, or what? So there we have it. Ghost stories from around the world. A Californian woman's home plays host to one of the most terrifying paranormal events on record. In New England, a woman is possessed by an evil spirit so strong, even the Catholic Church fails to defeat it. And a British teenager can see and talk to ghosts. Is she proof that some children have the gift? Are these bizarre stories evidence that ghosts exist? Can we seek comfort in rational explanations, or do we ignore them at our peril? You decide.
Join me again next time for more stories that will undoubtedly be weird or what? You know, I've been around for a while. Met some interesting people. Done some crazy things. So you just might think that there's not much that can take me by surprise. You'd be wrong. The world is full of stories, science and things that amaze and confound me. Every single day, incredible mysteries that keep me awake at night. Some I can answer. Others just defy logic.
Is the history of the world wrong? In a Mexican cave, a young girl finds a bizarre 900-year-old skeleton. Is it evidence aliens once walked our planet?
This is the equivalent of landing on the moon.
A Peruvian doctor discovers stone carvings that could rewrite the history of evolution. Did dinosaurs live alongside humans?
This is one of archaeological's most baffling enigmas.
And a 2,000-year-old wooden model reveals an incredible secret. Did the ancient Egyptians invent the airplane?
This is going to throw the way we view ancient civilizations completely topsy-turvy.
Yeah. It's a weird world, and I love it. I love books. They make me think, especially anything about history. Thousands of years of human development and achievement. They're all contained in the pages of these wonderful documents that not only teach generation after generation about where we came from, but where we might be going. And have you ever stopped to consider what it might mean for us if all we've learned and all we think we've learned about our past is wrong? It's unthinkable, isn't it? Well, guess what? There's real and bizarre events out there that are telling us we may need to rethink everything we know about everything. The unthinkable is here.
Researcher Lloyd Pye is the guardian of what he contends is the most important artifact ever discovered. The story begins in the Mexican countryside over 80 years ago.
It was originally discovered in about 1930 by a young girl about 100 miles southwest of Chihuahua. She was visiting relatives there. She went out exploring the area, found a mine tunnel, went in, and inside the tunnel found two skeletons.
Examining the bones, the girl thinks one of the skulls looks very strange.
It was a misformed or misshapen skull. She believed it was a deformity.
With no idea what she stumbled across, the girl removes the skull as a macabre souvenir. She holds onto it for 60 years.
She brought it to her home in El Paso, kept it for her whole life. When she found out that she was dying in the early 90s, she asked some friends if they would take it for her.
The skull ends up in the care of Melanie Young, a medical professional who immediately makes a shocking discovery.
She had seen a lot of deformity, and she said right away, I don't think this is necessarily a deformed human skull. And that's how I got involved.
Perplexed, Melanie approaches Lloyd. He's an expert in human skulls. But in his years of studying human development, he's never seen anything like it.
When I looked into those eyes, it was like, whoa, this really is something unusual. It's so unusual, it's so bizarre. A moron can see this is not really a human skull. It's something else, but what? But by the same token, I was like everybody else. My first reaction was it has to be some kind of deformity, because if it's not, then this is the equivalent of the shepherd that found the Dead Sea Scrolls. I mean, this is a big deal, and I didn't believe that that kind of thing would just fall into my lap. I took it to experts in every field of human physiology. The eye guy, the brain guy, the ear guy, the skull shape guy. During the course of '99, I came to understand that physiologically, it was really nothing like a human. It is human-like, but it is definitely non-human. No other way to say it.
But if it's not human, what was it? Lloyd broadens his search.
I took it to experts in UFOs and aliens and have people who had been in it for years evaluated.
After close examination, the UFO experts reach a stunning conclusion.
The skull is an alien that died on Earth and was buried on Earth 900 years ago. The consensus was, it looks like the skull of a gray alien. The alien that we all know, the one with the heart-shaped face on a thin little neck and the weird eyes, we all know that look, a gray alien.
With this in mind, Lloyd and his supporters name the artifact the Starchild skull. They keep looking for answers.
How it got here, I don't know. Was it crash landed? I don't know. Did it come here on a visit and get sick and die? I don't know. The implications are as big as you can imagine. The Starchild is going to change history. It's going to prove that at least once an alien being walked on the Earth.
Dear friends, we are gathered here today to pay our last tributes and respects to the memory of our departed and beloved alien child. Oh, sorry, would you excuse me for a moment? Now, this story is definitely weird, or what? Does the Starchild skull belong to an alien child who was visiting or even conceived on Earth but tragically died? If so, does this change the course of history? But even more importantly, what about the parents? Did anyone think of letting them know? Did they give their child a proper farewell? I doubt it. I'm so sorry. Was a wonderful child who loved comics, sports, and practical jokes like destroying planets with his father's death ray. He'll be sadly missed. Would anyone like to say a few words? Is the Starchild skull the most important archaeological discovery ever made? Not everyone thinks so. Yale University neurology professor Stephen Novella has studied the Starchild skull and claims its appearance is nothing unusual.
Going through medical school and training as a neurologist, I've seen many examples of similar kinds of deformities before. There are lots of genetic anomalies that produce abnormalities or deformities.
Novella's research has led him to believe the Starchild skull belonged to a human suffering from a medical condition called hydrocephalus.
Hydrocephalus is a term that literally means water on the brain. And what happens is that the fluid that's normally inside and around the brain does not flow like it normally should, and that causes the water and the pressure to build up inside the brain and inside the skull. In young children where the bones of the skull have not yet fused, this can cause the skull to balloon out, sometimes even to incredible size. In an adult where all the bones of the skull have completely fused together, then the hydrocephalus would just cause increased pressure on the brain, but not an expansion of the skull itself.
For Novella, it's this ballooning that explains the Starchild skull's unusual appearance.
The overall size and shape of the skull and the arrangement of the deformities matches pictures of children and skulls of people with hydrocephalus. Certainly, I've seen pictures of many of them which look very similar to the Starchild skulls.
Sadly, there would have been no treatment for this painful condition in the era from which the Starchild skull belongs.
The modern treatment for hydrocephalus is to drain the fluid out from inside the brain. It reverses all of the abnormal effects of the hydrocephalus. This is a modern neurosurgical treatment, however. This would not have been available prior to 50 or 60 years ago, let alone hundreds of years ago.
So does this mean that we've yet to play host to intergalactic visitors?
I have nothing against the notion that there are aliens in the universe. I think it would be really cool. I just don't think this skull is it. This is not the evidence of anything alien. Lloyd Pye would have you believe that this one skull, this one bit of evidence, which really has been very imperfectly examined, is enough to rewrite everything that we know. Of course, he's been making that claim for years. Everything you think you know is wrong. That's sort of his shtick, alternative science, alternative history. He wants to brush aside hundreds of years of evidence and expertise. He thinks all scientists are closed-minded and wrong, and therefore he can come up with any fantasy he likes and present that as the truth, because he can just ignore all of established science.
So is this the end of the mystery? Did the Starchild skull belong to a human suffering from hydrocephalus? Trenton Holliday and John Verano are professors of anthropology at the University of Tulane. They have a different take.
Originally, when I saw the skull, I suspected it might have suffered from hydrocephaly. However, I've since revised my opinion on that. I don't think it was a hydrocephalus individual.
So if not an alien and not hydrocephalic, just who was the Starchild?
The most unusual feature of the Starchild skull is just the shape of the skull. It's flattened in the back, it's bulged at the sides, and I can explain that very easily by cradle boarding.
Cradle boarding was an early solution to a problem many of us face today, making kids portable.
Cradle boarding was a very common practice in South America. It was originally done as a means of restraining the infants so that they could be brought out into the fields. It also was done for aesthetic reasons.
But how could a simple baby-carrying device create the bizarre shape of the Starchild skull?
Here's an example of an actual cradle board from Peru. I've strapped on a doll just to give you an idea of the way an infant would be put on it. And then here you can see how the head is strapped down. A strap goes over the forehead and goes over the back of the skull, holds the child's head in place, allows it to move probably from side to side. And in fact, many of these are asymmetrical, which suggests that they were lying habitually to one side or another.
But cradle boarding had a side effect. As the skull was compressed in one direction, it grew in the other to make room for the baby's rapidly developing brain.
This is a child skull that was cradle boarded. It's bulging out on the two sides, and that's because there's pressure that was put on the back side of the skull. What you can see is the way the skull is flattened from the back and this kind of bulging up from the side, giving it this unusual shape that if you didn't know about cradle boarding, you might think, boy, that's a bizarre-looking human skull.
Were the strange features of the Starchild skull caused by an ancient child-carrying device? Or is the truth way more bizarre?
The Starchild had an alien father and an alien mother.
The features of a 900-year-old skull puzzle the scientific community. Some offer practical explanations, such as cradle boarding. Others disagree.
When a skull is cradle boarded, a baby's bones are so soft that they flatten. So if you feel this, It's very flat as the board that it was pressed to. The Starchild has its natural convolutions to it. So what that means is it was not flattened artificially, it grew this way. Its genes told it to grow. Now, another interesting difference is that a normal human, the crown of the head is round, all the way round. Here, rounded, rounded. If you look at the Starchild, you see clearly that there is a crease here down the middle. A crease. And that could only occur if the suture, this suture line right here, had been fused in a human, was fused early, and then you could have a shape like this where the brain would grow out and around, and that wouldn't really spread out because the suture line would be prematurely fused. But we CAT scanned the Starchild and all of its sutures are open. There's no premature fusing. It's very normal. And also, it's very symmetrical. If you look at the whole skull, it's extraordinarily symmetrical. For as strange as it looks, it's more symmetrical than the human skull. It's more symmetrical than my skull or any average person's skull. In fact, one of the hallmarks of beauty, everyone agrees, is that the most symmetrical faces are the most beautiful in people, tend to be. So that too is very different. Now, another aspect of extreme difference between the Starchild and a human is the thickness of the bone, and we can see that very closely here. You see the difference. It's half or less. The Starchild's bone is half or less as thick. It weighs half as much. It's very much lighter in the hand than is a human skull.
So if it's not cradle boarding, could hydrocephaly have deformed the skull?
Anybody that says the Starchild is a hydrocephalic is missing a very important point. When you look at standard hydrocephalic pictures, you see it's blown up all around. There's no significant features like this. This grew this way because its genes told it to grow that way.
Having dismissed the opinion of traditional science, Lloyd undertook his own research. His findings are astonishing.
What makes the Starchild skull different is that there are 25 major physical differences between it and human skulls. There's not one part of it that's exactly like a human. It is completely different, and what that indicates is that its genes are radically different.
But does this mean the Starchild skull could only be of extraterrestrial origin? In 2003, DNA technology allowed Pi to put his theory to the test.
We got the first test by a laboratory that was capable of doing ancient DNA, and the answer that they got was that the mother was human and the father was not. Clearly something's wrong with the father. The father's not human.
Is the Starchild skull evidence that aliens bred with humans? Native American legends tell stories strikingly similar to Pi's theory.
There would be beings from the stars would come down from the skies, pick a woman in a village, and they would make her pregnant. So the Starchild fit right into that.
But as technology advances, so does the story of the Starchild skull. In early 2011, a new DNA test led Lloyd to an even more astonishing claim.
The conclusion that we've come to now after several DNA tests and an extensive analysis of those results is that the Starchild had an alien father and an alien mother. And when I say alien, I mean non-human. The difference is so stark, the difference is so wide, there is no way that we can call this a human.
Is this the first physical evidence that aliens exist? Lloyd has no doubt.
It's going to change human history to have to accept that at least once, 900 years ago, an alien being walked the earth, lived here, died here, and was buried here. This is the equivalent of landing on the moon.
What is the Starchild skull? For now it remains an enigma. Did it belong to a deformed child or an ancient adult with a disease of the brain? Is it conclusive evidence that we are not alone? Weird. Or what?
You know, I've always had a fascination with the relics of the ancient past. And I'm not just talking about the Beatles or the Rolling Stones or Leonard Nimoy. No. When it comes to our far distant history, there's nothing quite as spectacular, mysterious, and even frightening as dinosaurs. Surely the king of all creatures, real-life monsters that dominated the planet until something wiped them out, long before man even evolved. What a pity that we only find them now in museums or as cute toys. Can you imagine what it would be like to see one in the flesh? Well, maybe we already have. And maybe we still can. Weird. Or what?
Adventurer Dennis Swift travels the world in search of ancient artifacts, but nothing he's found compares to a discovery made in Ica, Peru, by a man named Javier Cabrera.
Dr. Cabrera made the greatest discovery in the history of mankind. The implications are staggering.
It began innocently enough at a birthday party in 1966.
It was Dr. Cabrera's 42nd birthday.
One of the doctor's oldest friends brings him a special gift.
Dr. Cabrera was given a stone. It was found in some official archaeological excavations.
The stone was carved by an ancient Peruvian tribe. His friend thinks it's a trinket, but the doctor makes a discovery that sets his heart racing. Etched into the stone is an image that defies explanation.
He recognized it to be a species of fish that went extinct 150 million years ago. Now, how do you explain that?
Seeking answers, the doctor employs local workmen to find more stones.
Dr. Cabrera began to find more in these stones, and people brought them to him. The more he delved into it, the more it consumed his life.
As more and more stones arrive, Dr. Cabrera realizes they feature other images that just shouldn't have been there.
Some of the stones seem to be depicting impossible scenes, things that would cause the textbooks to be rewritten.
What had the doctor found? It was something that would shock the world.
He risked his reputation. He said, if you look closely at this, you'll see a dinosaur carved there with two people.
It's an astonishing moment, but how could it be? Dinosaur fossils weren't identified until 1824. How could an ancient people have known about them 1,000 years ago?
Finding artifacts and information that showed that these people had knowledge of dinosaurs that predated our knowledge was truly amazing.
But could it be proved? After comparing the etchings on over 400 stones to real fossils, he discovered the depictions were accurate. The Peruvian artists must have known what dinosaurs looked like.
Now, not only is that astonishing, it began to say to him, they saw living, breathing dinosaurs. This is one of archaeological's most baffling enigmas.
Did the dinosaurs live millions of years longer than we thought they did?
I've studied the Ica stones for well over 20 years. I believe they are very substantial, strong evidence that dinosaurs and man lived together.
Current scientific belief is that the dinosaurs were wiped out by an asteroid 66 million years ago. 59 million years before early man even existed. Swift, however, believes there's evidence to the contrary.
In the cultures around the world, they talk about encountering these animals of giant size, and they fit the description of what we would call a dinosaur. Of course, dinosaur was not coined until 1841 by Sir Edward Owen. It's a compound Greek word that means terrible lizard or frightfully fearful lizard. If you read the science books of the 1300s, 1400s, and 1500s, when they talk about dragons, they resemble very much what we would describe as a dinosaur. And in fact, there's an account of an Irishman in 900 AD who encountered a beast that had like triangular shaped, diamond shapes on its back. It had a head like a horse, and it had big iron spikes on the back of its tail. And it describes his legs. Well, what animal could that be? It could only be a stegosaurus. I've been with the American Indians, and they say we don't like to tell white people because they make fun of us, but they believe that their ancestors fought against what we would call a triceratops.
Could some dinosaurs have survived extinction? Did they walk among ancient Peruvians? For Swift, the artifact's uncannily accurate proportions don't lie.
Here's a Styracosaurus on the stone. Does it have dermal spines? Yeah. Does the tail sticking out when it's walking? Yes. Does it have 3 toes? Yes. All right, so it's a dinosaur.
But if Swift is right, there's an even bigger question. If dinosaurs walked the Earth with humans only a relatively short time ago, then what happened to them? And where are they?
I believe that they existed from a few thousand years ago to maybe 500 years ago, and there's a possibility that there could be a handful left. There was a Frenchman in 1967, I believe, even took photographs of a footprint. It's 3-toed, it's huge, and it has a claw on the back. Only a dinosaur had that kind of a footprint. So, yeah, dinosaurs could be out there.
Oh, boy, this is incredible. I mean, that guy thinks that dinosaurs are still roaming the Earth. Wow. Let's think about what that means. There's not a lot of room left on the planet, so they're going to have to share our neighborhoods, right? Maybe we could have one as a pet. Can you imagine keeping one in your backyard? Ooh. I think not. Has somebody got a pooper scooper? A big one.
Did man and dinosaur coexist? Should we rip up our history books?
I think that people actually watch the Flintstones and think it's reality programming.
Ancient Peruvian stone carvings pose a shocking question. Did our ancient ancestors walk alongside dinosaurs? Archaeologist Ken Feder doesn't think so.
I think that people actually watch the Flintstones and think it's reality programming. It's not, it's a cartoon, folks. Fred did not have a pet dinosaur. That really didn't happen.
But how can Feder be sure humans never saw dinosaurs? He points to the tens of thousands of fossils collected worldwide, which confirm they died out 66 million years ago.
We have a whole lot of evidence that dinosaurs died off long before there were people. And the fact that we have a bunch of stones with carvings and people writing around on dinosaurs is not strong evidence at all.
But if ancient Peruvians didn't see dinosaurs, how do we explain the Ica stones?
They're fakes, they're hoaxes. The story of the Ica stones, from start to finish, mirrors the stories of lots of other archaeological hoaxes. They start small, but once it becomes clear that there's a guy willing to buy some stones, suddenly we have thousands of these things, and the actual stones themselves become more and more elaborate.
Rather than finding them in caves, could the Peruvian peasants simply have made the stones themselves? There's only one way to find out. Art student Justine McGrath has been asked to test Feder's theory that the stones are merely fakes. She's going to attempt to replicate the stones using basic tools.
So I begin by just copying out the image. It's a very simple line drawing.
The drawing complete, Justine begins carving. She uses a power tool for speed, though the etching could easily be done by hand. Although the pattern is complete, the stone doesn't have an ancient look. Justine has an inexpensive solution.
I'm going to cover the stone in a mixture of manure and olive oil.
It's a rather down-to-earth solution. Her method of baking the stones is equally low-tech. But could some manure, olive oil, and a barbecue really recreate the mysterious Ica stones?
After just 3 hours of baking, this is what my Ica stone looks like.
For Feder, the results of this experiment are decisive.
We have two possible explanations in science, one that requires overturning everything we know, and one that simply requires that people are trying to make a buck by hoaxing. So it's a lot easier for me to accept the possibility that people are making fakes than to completely rewrite everything we know about, again, geology, biology, and so on. This compressing, this sort of pushing all of human history into just a few thousand years is sort of absurd on its face. Again, when you have a convergence of evidence, convergence of data, archaeological evidence, separate, geological evidence, separate, biological evidence, separate, paleontological evidence, separate, historic evidence, separate, and when all that data converges and points in exactly the same direction, in ancient Earth, dinosaurs dying off tens of millions of years ago, first human ancestors 5, 6, 7 million years ago walking upright in the plains of Africa, all that evidence converges, it all is mutually supportive. This notion, there really isn't any place in that history for people riding their dinosaurs to the drive-in movie theater.
Is this the end of the mystery? Are the ecostones just fakes? Author Andy Lloyd is not so sure.
They weren't just created in someone's shed in the back garden 20 years ago. Some scientific work that's been done on them appears to indicate that there is a degree of oxidation over the engravings, which would indicate that they're of some antiquity.
So, if the stones really are ancient, that proves that the images they depict must have happened, right? Well, not necessarily.
I don't think that's very, very likely that man and dinosaur could have shared the Earth at any time. However, that's not to say that there isn't something rather wonderful about the ecostones in this regard. And one of the ideas that I've put forward is that the makers of the ecostones, the artists from ancient Peru who created them, may have received knowledge about dinosaurs from ancient civilizations whose own understanding of the dinosaurs was as good as ours.
Civilizations stretching back to ancient Greece unearthed dinosaur remains. They thought they were the bones of giants. But what if some ancient civilization did know what they were? Who could have done such a thing?
Atlantis is an excellent candidate because the discussions and descriptions of Atlantis show that it was a very technologically advanced civilization for its time.
The lost city of Atlantis, an advanced ancient civilization that is said to have flourished around the time of the Ice Age before falling into the ocean. Could Atlanteans have discovered dinosaurs?
We can speculate that the Atlanteans had a very good understanding of natural history because their ability with science and technology was evidently quite far advanced. They would have probably dug up dinosaur bones during their mining expeditions and pieced together a dinosaur in the same way that we did.
But many believe Atlantis to be little more than a legend, based on stories told by the Greek philosopher Plato. Is this strong enough evidence of its existence?
We can't authenticate the existence of Atlantis through anything other than Plato's writings, but some of his writings are some of the most important literature from that period. It seems odd that it's a story that Plato would have made up. This is the missing Atlantean link in our understanding of ancient civilizations and knowledge.
Could the Atlanteans have traveled the world, spreading a knowledge that was kept alive in stories and art? Or could the ecostones be definitive proof that our ancestors shared the Earth with dinosaurs? Or are they one of the most elaborate hoaxes of all time? Perhaps one day we'll know for sure, but in the meantime, it's most certainly weird. Or what? A 2,000-year-old wooden model excavated from Egypt's oldest pyramid reveals an amazing secret. Did the ancients invent modern flight?
It could have been launched easily from the top of a pyramid.
You know, I like to think of myself as a bit of an adventurer, or sort of an Indiana Jones, if you like. You see, I've been all over the world and collected some amazing relics. Wrong relic. Of course, some are more amazing than others. And some make you wonder what they might say if they could talk. Can you imagine finding something that could truly change the world? Well, here it is.
Saqqara, Egypt. In one of the country's oldest burial grounds, French archaeologists begin to unearth the burial tomb of the 3rd century BC official, Paddy Iman. Among the artifacts recovered is what looks to be a model of a bird. It's cataloged and stored at the Cairo Museum for over 70 years. But no one could predict the shock waves Special Register 6347 would soon make. The late Egyptologist Dr. Khalil Messiah realized the model was very unusual. It leads him to a breathtaking conclusion.
Dr. Messiah had found evidence of what appears to be a glider or an airplane, something that the ancient Egyptians supposedly didn't have.
Author David Childress thinks that Dr. Messiah has much to teach historians and the world.
To me, the research of Dr. Khalil Messiah is very important, because here we have a mainstream Egyptologist finding an artifact that we know is authentic, coming from over 2,000 years ago, a model, a very miniature model of an airplane, much like the early airplanes that were built in America and around the world at the turn of the century.
Could the artifact be a model of an ancient flying machine? It's a stunning revelation. Our histories tell us the first powered human flight was in 1903. If Dr. Messiah is correct, the ancient Egyptians may have beaten the Wright brothers by over 2,000 years. Although met with initial skepticism, tests by leading aeronautical engineers prove that the model, now known as the Saqqara bird, was designed for flight.
Ancient cultures have many stories of flight, of vimanas, of magic carpets, of flying chariots. But here with the Saqqara bird, we have an actual model of what could be an ancient airplane.
Did the ancient Egyptians experiment with flight? Is the artifact the model of a full-size glider or plane?
It's very important that we find artifacts like the Saqqara bird and other strange artifacts from these ancient cultures, because it really helps us place their legends and myths in contexts, such as flight. Is it possible that they actually had flight like we do today? And I think they did.
Is the Saqqara bird proof that the ancient Egyptians had technology 2,000 years ahead of its time? And if they did, how did they get it?
This is going to throw Egyptology and the way we view ancient civilizations completely topsy-turvy.
A man discovers a model wooden bird in a Cairo museum. Is the Saqqara bird proof the Egyptians took to the skies 2,000 years ago? Katja Gobes is an Egyptologist. She has her doubts.
When I first heard that the Saqqara bird was being used to support such claims of early aviation, I was completely taken aback. Certainly they were fascinated with the skies. They believed that their dead ascended to the sky to become celestial gods after death. Their chief deities were seen to be traveling through the sky, the sun god being the most important there, but there is no evidence whatsoever to suggest that the Egyptians had an interest in aviation.
But if the Saqqara bird was not the model of a glider, what was it?
The symbol of a bird is extremely important within the Egyptian religious and political system. We find them used in the hieroglyphic writing system. We find them as images protecting the king.
One bird in particular, the falcon, had a role which explains why it would be placed in a tomb.
The deceased Egyptian wishes to ascend to the sky and sometimes says he does so on falcon's wings. In particular, the falcon with the outstretched wings you will find at the back of the king's head, indicating that he is afforded the protection of the gods, and he is in fact Horus on earth. We find amuletic representations of falcons as protective devices in funerary contexts. That means in Egyptian tombs, decorating the coffins of the dead, being placed as little protective objects, amulets, on the actual mummies, or painted on the coffins, painted on the sides of the on the walls of the tombs, and so forth.
There's one problem, though. The Saqqara bird looks nothing like the other Egyptian falcons. So what can explain its flat tail and plane-like wing?
It is not unheard of that toys were given to deceased children, and they would be put into their tombs so they would be accessible for their afterlife and for their eternal pleasure.
Could the mysterious artifact be nothing more than a simple child's toy? Are the smooth body and flat tail the result of amateur craftsmanship and not deliberate design?
Even though there are a few idiosyncrasies in its representation, the Saqqara bird is most likely an image of a falcon. There is no evidence that the Egyptians experimented with aviation technology. The claim is ludicrous, to say the least, so it is not inconceivable that the Saqqara bird was a toy that was given to a child, or even to an adult who wanted to take his favorite childhood toy with him into the afterlife.
Are we reading too much into an ancient toy? Not everyone thinks so.
Artifacts like the Saqqara bird are important because science likes to think it's got everything explained. We can explain how the Egyptians built the pyramids and all of their ancient technology, but items like the Saqqara bird throw a monkey wrench into some of these old theories, because suddenly it's possible that the ancient Egyptians and other civilizations could do much like we did and have flight, have electricity, have machines. When we look at ancient civilizations like the ancient Egyptians, we see that they've made so many magnificent buildings, and their sciences were very exact. They were good engineers. They studied nature tremendously. So the Saqqara bird seems to indicate that, yes, the ancient Egyptians knew about flight and had it.
But how can Childress be so sure that what looks like a bird is really a model airplane?
It's clearly an aerodynamic design and not just some simple toy. The wings are at what is known as the dihedral angle. It's a special angle that the wings of a glider have to be at in order to achieve lift. And the Saqqara bird has that.
So the wings are airworthy, but what about the tail?
Dr. Messia had also found evidence that the very top part of the tail rudder had been broken off. And he theorized that it had, in fact, had also another vertical tail, much like a modern jet would have.
But if the Saqqara bird was a model of an ancient glider, there's one big problem. Where in Egypt's flat desert could you glide from?
If it was a glider, it could have been launched easily from the top of a pyramid, perhaps, much like hang gliders themselves launch today off of cliffs and mountains, or even The Egyptians could have developed a relatively primitive catapult-type launching system that would have given this glider the power to get in the air and then fly over areas of Egypt. I believe that the ancient Egyptians and other civilizations had powered flight, as well as gliders and airships and balloons, and even they had electricity and lights. Even they must have had power tools in some of their cases to build some of the buildings they had.
Were the crowning achievements of Egyptian civilization used as a launch pad by an ancient pair of Wright brothers?
If scientists are right that this is a model of a functioning glider, this is going to throw Egyptology and the way we view ancient civilizations completely topsy-turvy.
Okay, this is blowing my mind. Are they honestly trying to tell me that this 2,000-year-old ugly duckling is evidence of an ancient mastery of the laws of aerodynamics, that it could fly? Well, there's only one way to find out. Anybody got any clue? A simple bird replica or evidence of early flight? What is the Saqqara bird? Martin Gregory designs gliders. He thinks he knows the answer.
When I first heard the Saqqara bird was the model for a full-size airplane, I was skeptical to say the least. I knew for a start that the ancient Egyptians didn't have anything that could be used as an engine to power an aeroplane, and that gives you the clue, because Egypt's pretty flat and you're going to need some way of getting the aeroplane into the air, and you also, if you're going to use it for carrying cargo, going to need something to power it so it can travel a useful distance. I decided the only way I could find out if the Saqqara bird could have been a flying model was to build one myself.
Using the exact dimensions of the ancient artifact, Gregory constructs an identical replica. He'll launch it with a device used to test scale glider models.
I'm just about to launch the Saqqara bird in its original form as it came out of the pyramid with no tailplane. That flight did what I expected it to do. Its lack of aerodynamics kicked in and it tumbled and fell to the ground.
The test is conclusive.
A model of that size needs a stabilizing tail.
Dr. Messia believed that the Saqqara bird originally had a tail, which had snapped off with age. Could a tail make a difference?
Next, we're going to launch the Saqqara bird again, but this time fitted with a tailplane. This will stabilize it and let us see how good or poor a glider it is.
2,000 years of history hang on this one test. It travels further, but not much. The end results are the same.
The wing has rounded edges, and that just doesn't generate very much lift at all. And in terms of stability, all modern airplanes have the wing bent up at the tips for stability instead of swooping down like this one does.
So does the experiment prove that the Saqqara bird was really a child's toy? Following his experiment, Gregory has a theory of his own.
I think there's a possibility that it's a wind vane. I discounted the child's toy theory on the grounds that all real birds have a flat horizontal tail rather than a vertical fin, and most children will be able to recognize the difference and not be fooled by the presence of the fin. To find out whether it could have been a wind vane, I put a pivot on the belly of it, and as you can see, I think it's a far better weather vane than it is a flying model.
So, Is the answer to a 2,000-year-old mystery really blowing in the wind? Was the Saqqara bird simply an ancient plaything? Or could it be evidence of mankind's first attempt at flight? We may never know. Weird or what? So there we have it. 3 ancient artifacts that bring into question everything we understand about history. A bizarrely shaped skull is found in a Mexican cave. Is it proof that aliens once visited Earth? Scenes depicted on ancient stone carvings question our natural history. Did man and dinosaur share our planet? And a 2,000-year-old wooden model suggests the impossible. Did an ancient civilization fly? You decide.
Join me again next time for more stories that will undoubtedly be weird or what? You know, I've been around for a while. Met some interesting people. Done some crazy things. So you just might think that there's not much that can take me by surprise. You'd be wrong. The world is full of stories, science and things that amaze and confound me. Every single day, incredible mysteries that keep me awake at night. Some I can answer. Others just defy logic.
Do monsters exist? In West Virginia, a town is terrorized by a 7-foot winged demon. Did it cause the death of 46 people?
It had 2 huge black wings and no head, no arms.
In Newfoundland, a macabre creature washes up on a local beach. Are our oceans concealing a megabeast?
It was nothing that either of us had ever seen or could imagine.
And in New Delhi, thousands are attacked by a metal-clawed monster. Was it a man or a beast?
People ran off in absolute panic. They just were fleeing from the scene.
Yeah. It's a weird world, and I love it. You know, I just had a lovely holiday in Scotland. Edinburgh Castle, bagpipes, the whole deal. Even went to Loch Ness, where Nessie, famous Loch Ness monster, is supposed to live. We got on this boat, went out on the loch, searching for hours. Then guess what I saw? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Total waste of time. And $6. Are monsters nothing more than bait to lure gullible tourists? Do things like Yeti, Bigfoot, and Chupacabra exist? I got news for you. They just might.
Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Nearly 50 years ago, this sleepy farming town was brutally awoken by a series of monstrous events that are still a mystery today. Lorne Coleman is an author. He documented the incidents, which began on the night of November 15th, 1966, when 2 young couples took a drive.
Roger and Linda Scarborough and the Mallets were driving around in the old TNT area. It was called TNT because that's where dynamite was stored during World War II.
Secluded and dark, TNT was also a well-known lover's lane. But instead of fun, the four teenagers are about to encounter a living nightmare.
All of a sudden, they see this creature that's 6 feet tall, and it's coming to them. It's having glowing red eyes in its chest, which are reflecting the headlights. It had 2 huge black wings, no head, no arms. All of a sudden, it goes into the air and starts flying. They started racing back to Point Pleasant, and the creature was in back of the car. Really, they felt it almost was touching both sides of the highway. Red glowing eyes, no arms, just these huge wings.
Reaching speeds of 100 miles an hour, the chase continues until finally the creature disappears. Was there something unpleasant in Point Pleasant?
The next day, they come back out there and they see it flying overhead. So all of a sudden, you get more and more kind of word of mouth in the town that this creature's been around, people are seeing it. The newspapers hadn't even caught on to the reports yet. So the next day, you have Marcella Bennett saying she's going over to one of her relatives' houses, which it's a bunch of houses right along the road that leads to the TNT. She gets close to the house and all of a sudden on the roof of the house sees the Mothman. She's carrying her baby in her arms and falls on the baby out of terror and fright. Gets up, races off, and they tell the police too. What occurs, however, is that it's then that it gets into the newspaper, and all of a sudden you had within, a few weeks, 200 people saying that they'd seen the Mothman.
This remarkable story sends shockwaves through the town. The media calls the creature the Mothman. Local resident Faye Laporte was 14 years old at the time. 3 days after the first sighting, she decided to visit the scene for herself.
That's the road over there that we drove down, me and my brother, to come out here to try to find the so-called Mothman we heard about. My brother said, well, I'm just going to see if I can find it and prove that it's just somebody in a Halloween costume or something on wires or something. As we got to the area, my brother kept looking past me to the window. I said, well, what is it? What are you looking at? He said, well, don't look right now. He said, but there's something beside the car there by the window. So he slammed the brakes on and just like it was nothing, just leaped right up on the car. Even though it was dark, you could still see the eyes. The eyes held me. The most red, I can't explain the red. It just was such a red that I just can't describe it. It's just like a color that it looks like they're really lit up, but it's not a glow, but it's perfectly lit up that you cannot miss it. And it's like, that's all you see when you look at it. It had the features of a bird combined with a human. We were really scared, and I was begging and crying for my brother to go ahead and let's get out here. That's when I finally saw it open up its wings and just flew off in the sky so pretty, and it was gone.
For the next year, the Mothman terrorizes the people of Point Pleasant.
We were coming up the road here, and we looked around the curve there, and we thought it was a car light. So we stopped the car, and the thing came over the top of the car. Well, I just think it's something supernatural that we can't explain or something like that. I know I can't explain it, that's for sure.
They wonder where it will all end. 13 months after the first sighting, they get their answer.
The Silver Bridge between West Virginia and Ohio, starting at Point Pleasant, collapsed on December 15th, 1967. 67 people fell into the water of the Ohio River. 46 died, and 2 bodies never were even found.
There's seemingly no apparent reason for this horrific tragedy. Then comes a terrifying report. The night before the disaster, the Mothman was seen hanging from the Silver Bridge.
And people were scared. They were so scared they didn't want to talk about the bridge, they didn't want to talk about Mothman, they didn't want to talk about anything. This town became quiet. And everybody for a long time said that nobody talked. And you still have people that won't talk about the bridge collapse today.
The Mothman was never seen again. For 45 years, this incredible story has baffled experts. But some believe recent evidence could finally explain the mystery of the Mothman. Joe Nickell is a paranormal investigator with Skeptical Inquirer Science magazine.
We human beings misperceive all the time. People say, I know what I saw. Actually, they know what they think they saw.
Joe believes the Mothman wasn't quite the monstrous beast it was made out to be.
I believe the barred owl is the creature that most clearly fits the bill.
Was the Mothman simply an owl? Nickell thinks the answer lies in Linda Scarberry's first descriptions back in 1966.
Her original description of Mothman is of a very large, winged creature. She said it had no neck, virtually no real head, just eyes, very large eyes, round and shining like a bicycle reflector. In the owl family, there are different degrees of what's called eye shine. Among the most potent is that of the barred owl, which has a deep crimson eye shine. It's a large owl with big wingspan. It would look like just eyes set at the top of a body with wings up. It flies in a silent moth-like flight. It has pretty much exactly the characteristics of Mothman, the original sightings.
But does Nichols' theory explain the height? Eyewitnesses reported a creature that was 6 or 7 feet tall.
We know that people misperceive, and I'm quite confident that somebody looking and not knowing what it is at night quickly and maybe being frightened by it, I dare say I would misjudge the distance and therefore misjudge the height. Keep in mind that the barred owl does not fly around with a yardstick in its claw for measurement purposes. So if you're looking at it and you don't know what it is, because it's a funny looking creature, so I think that people misperceived the distance and therefore misjudged the height. And they were excited and they kind of focused in on it, and that also made it loom large in their consciousness. Barred owls were at the site. This was the McClintock Wildlife Preserve, overlaps with the TNT area, and there were barred owls in that area. So I would say this in summary: if it looked like a barred owl and acted like a barred owl and had red reflector eyes, maybe it was a barred owl.
It's incredible, isn't it? Here we have an entire town in fear of their lives from something that can't explain, a creature 7 feet tall that can fly 100 miles an hour and maybe even bring down a bridge, and they blame it on this guy? Don't get me wrong, he's scary if you're a field mouse. Perhaps the real question here is, why did so many people think they saw a monster and even blame it for the death of 46 people? Weird or what?
A psychologist believes there's one sure way to solve the mystery of the Mothman: using fear.
We're going to try to induce a mild case of mass psychogenic illness.
A mysterious winged creature called the Mothman terrorizes a town in West Virginia. Is it proof that monsters exist? Jim Hurat is a psychologist. He believes the Mothman can be explained by a phenomena called MPI.
Mass psychogenic illness, or MPI, is a psychological term for an outbreak of mysterious illness that has no medical cause, but it's entirely in someone's head. Before you know it, you have a contagion effect, whereby those social symptoms start spreading in a large group of people. Mass psychogenic illness tends to be associated with negatives because people oftentimes report and care about and give a lot of credence to dramatic things in the environment. And oftentimes, just from our evolutionary standpoint, those are dangerous things, negative things. So when it comes to illness, that's something we want to avoid. So if we see someone get sick, that grabs our attention. Just like when we see something that might be paranormal, that grabs our attention too.
Was Mothman the result of social contagion? Huron believes he can prove his theory by showing what might have happened in Point Pleasant.
We're going to try to induce a mild case of mass psychogenic illness. I've selected a group of volunteers. I'm going to give them the suggestion that they're going to be visiting a very haunted place in the woods. We're going to take them out there and let their imaginations take over. What we should see, if my mass psychogenic illness is a plausible explanation for the Mothman sightings, is that we'll see a few people start having experiences, other people will notice that, and then we'll see an outbreak of similar symptoms, if that's what you want to call them, just due to social pressure. Was this fact? Was this fiction?
Huron begins by telling the group he needs their help to solve a series of disturbing paranormal incidents reported in the area. As night falls, the group sets out into the woods.
Everyone stop, please. Everyone fan out.
They are told to turn off their flashlights.
And stop.
From this point, they can only be turned on when someone thinks they experience something paranormal.
Just get your sense of bearings.
In just minutes, flashlights come on, and reports of paranormal activity flood in. Horan believes the flashlights act as social cues, which influence the other members of the group.
Felt a cold breeze before the wind started blowing.
You felt a cold breeze? Someone felt cold over there too.
I feel like someone is following me and someone is just waiting to say something. Like static electricity on my face.
Let me understand this. Like right here, you feel like there's static electricity on your face? Mm-hmm. Is it as soon as one or two cues took hold, then you start seeing a flurry of other flashlights going on. It percolated throughout the entire group. Exactly what we would expect with psychogenic illness in a group. Tonight's experiments were very impressive because it kind of confirmed what I think happened with the Mothman. That is, we had the right type of people in the right type of environment, an environment that was spooky, full of context, exactly the same kind of environment that the Mothman experiences happen, and a little bit of suggestion caused a flurry, an outbreak of experiences that otherwise wouldn't have happened. It's exactly what I thought happened with Mothman.
Was the Mothman all in the minds of its victims? And does this explain what eyewitnesses like Faye Laporte saw? Ken Gerhardt is a professional monster hunter. He believes the best way to solve the Mothman mystery is to hunt it down himself.
For the past decades, I have gone out and searched for hard physical evidence that we share our world with creatures, legendary beasts, things that have not been classified or verified by scientists. Mothman is a monster in the truest sense of the word. I mean, here you have a creature that doesn't match the description of anything we know about in the natural world. Something that seemingly stepped right out of a science fiction movie. Mothman's main motivation seems to be to chase and terrify people, and possibly leave a path of destruction and devastation in its wake. There are many people who blame Mothman for the collapse of the Silver Bridge and believe that there's actually a death curse associated with the Mothman. So I would say yes, Mothman is the ultimate monster.
Gerhardt has come to the McClintock Wildlife Reserve, close to where the Mothman was first sighted.
It's very exciting to be here in the actual location where Mothman was reported so many times back in the 1960s. If Mothman is a real physical animal, it's going to make an impact on its environment. And this could be tracks on the ground, nests, markings, and the like.
Using a camera trap, Gerhardt is hoping to catch Mothman unaware.
This is actually a motion-activated camera with an infrared beam, and anything that passes within that beam is actually going to be captured on this particular camera. I can put the camera out overnight and come back the following morning to determine whether, in fact, I've captured an image of the subject.
To attract his prey, Gearhart sets up a blasting device, a machine that broadcasts the sound of forest creatures in pain.
Many of the eyewitnesses said the Mothman made kind of a squeaking mechanical mouse sound. And fortunately, I have a little sound on here called lip squeak. And I think that's exactly what we need. Did you hear that? Something moving around there in the brush. I don't know what it was, but basically that last sound definitely evoked some type of response or reaction.
With his equipment set, it is now a waiting game. Will the Mothman reveal himself?
I don't know about you, but if I were a monster hunter, indeed, if I were hunting the Mothman, I think I'd be taking something a little more substantial than this. I mean, at least I think you take something like this. Wouldn't you? But we have to ask the question, if monsters really exist, why has no one, monster hunter or not, been able to catch one? Then again, if monsters were just ordinary critters, they wouldn't really be monsters, would they?
Returning the next day, monster hunter Ken Gearhart checks to see if he's found evidence of the Mothman.
Huh. Well, unfortunately, it doesn't look like we got anything on film. I may have been a little bit wrong about the placement of this camera. Lesson learned here is that monster hunting is a very arduous and time-consuming process, and it may take quite a bit of time before we actually get an image of our quarry.
The high-tech approach has failed to find anything, but Gearhart thinks he knows exactly what Mothman is.
I believe Mothman to be the product of negative energy. Consider for a moment the main location where Mothman was encountered. Many of the Native American tribes would avoid this area completely because they believed it to be haunted by monsters and evil spirits. And then you have the great curse of Chief Cornstalk, the Shawnee chief who, on his deathbed, cursed the area because the white men had betrayed him. So in that respect, I believe Mothman to be the accumulation of all of this negative energy, perhaps brought to life by some type of mechanism far beyond the realm of human comprehension. Beyond that, there have been reports of winged humanoid creatures all over the world for centuries. And in many ancient cultures, for example in Japan, where you have the tengu, which is a birdman, the tengu is often considered to be a bad omen or a harbinger of doom. You have the banshee from Scottish lore. And so in many of these mythologies and folklores, these winged creatures are often considered to be premonitions of doom and destruction. So I think that's a very interesting tie-in between Mothman and the timing of the bridge collapse.
Was Mothman a bad omen that somehow materialized in Point Pleasant? Or could it simply have been mass hysteria created by an owl? Weird, or what? A fisherman finds a giant, unidentifiable creature on a beach in Newfoundland.
It was nothing that either of us had ever seen or could imagine.
Are monsters lurking in the deep?
Ah, hey, whoa. You know, I used to love fishing. Nothing better than the thrill of landing a big one, the ultimate challenge between man and beast. Well, every now and then you catch something you're not expecting. Strange things that make you wonder, what is living in the depths of our oceans? I don't know.
In 2001, Gary Stenson was working as a fisheries officer in Newfoundland, Canada, when he received the strangest phone call of his career.
got a call from a fisherman. He was telling me about a creature on the beach that had washed up. He started to describe it to me, and it sounded unlike anything that I had encountered.
Mystified, Gary decides to meet the fisherman and investigate the strange sighting.
It was a very isolated area, and as we came up to it, we saw this large creature laying on the beach itself. I've never seen anything that looked like this. The whole thing was tapering to the tail end, and once it got to the tail end, it just broke off. We had thought that it might be something like a giant squid, which we do have here, but there are no tentacles that look like that. It didn't also look like a whale or a shark, which it could be. There was nothing that looked like a head. There was nothing that looked like any sort of structures that we could identify it.
In over 20 years as a fisheries officer, Gary thought he had seen it all, until now.
I've worked on a lot of whales, and I've worked on a lot of seals, and even some sharks that have come ashore, but this creature was nothing like that, and there was nothing that we could tell where it came from. From a distance, it had what looked like hair standing up all over it. It was about 5.5 meters long, about 2 meters wide, and about 1 meter high in the middle of it. There were a number of lobes. They looked almost like short arms with notches in between. It smelled a lot like rotting tissue. It was pretty heavy. We tried pushing on it. It was solid. It was nothing that we could move. So what we did was we took our knives and we tried to cut up and cut into the tissue.
As they cut into the carcass, they made a bizarre discovery.
The exterior of it was very hard. It was quite tough, but there was no sign of any organs. If it was a shark, there'd be cartilage, but there was no cartilage. So we looked for bone. If it was a whale, there'd be some bone in it, but none of this either. We spent a lot of time trying to decide what we thought it might be. And of course, as a scientist, you're very curious. And in fact, that's a sign of a good scientist to me is somebody who's curious about what they see. And of course, we were very curious as to what this might be. So we decided that the best thing to do would be to take some tissue with it. And we brought that back with us.
It seemed Gary and the fisherman had discovered a creature unknown to science.
It was nothing that either of us had ever seen or could imagine. It's not impossible that there's something out there that we haven't seen before that's lurking in the depths.
A giant creature washes up in Newfoundland. Was it an unknown species or a monster from the deep? And if there was one, could there be others? Remarkably, the answer is yes.
It's incredible. In the last century, giant weird blobs of, I don't know what, have been washing up all over the planet. Are they something awful from the bowels of ships? I hope not. In fact, they're so hard to identify that the only name scientists could come up with is globsters. Part glob, part monster. Globster. Clever. But what the hell are they?
Matthew Adele is a professor of anatomy. He believes the explanation is simple.
It sounds like something very mysterious, something completely unknown to science. There are dozens of reports of globsters from around the world going back over a century. They're usually formless and they don't contain any bones. There's no evidence of a head or a tail or any limbs. They're just big, shapeless globs of flesh. But there's no evidence so far that they're anything other than dead whales.
But if globsters are whales, how could tons of bones and internal organs be missing? Waddell thinks the answer lies in one of the strongest elements in nature, collagen, a protein found in whale skin.
Collagen is similar to steel in terms of tensile strength, so it's one of the toughest substances known to man. If you feel the back of your heel, feel your Achilles tendon, that's a big rope of collagen the size of your finger. Now imagine something like that woven in overlapping belts around an animal 100 feet long, and you get some idea of the strength of whale skin. It's just incredible.
Scientists think protective collagen allows whales to dive up to 2 miles below the surface of the ocean.
Many submarines would crush before they got down to that depth. Collagen is their pressure suit when they dive and their armor against things like sharks that would try to take bites out of them.
Waddell also believes collagen causes whales to decompose in a unique way.
Decomposition for whales is an interesting process because whales are different from other animals in 2 ways mainly. The first is that they're so big, just their sheer scale influences how they decompose. The other thing is the skin of whales is unique in the animal kingdom. It's incredibly thick, it's incredibly strong. You can hang up the entire weight of a whale by a hook through its skin. When a whale dies, the skin doesn't fall apart the way that normal animal skin does.
After death, scavengers rapidly devour the insides of a dead whale. But they leave the gristly collagen alone.
And once animals have eaten their way into the body to get the good stuff, it's easy for the bones to slide right out and sink to the bottom of the ocean. The skin falls off like a sock off of a foot. And now you have a 100-foot-long tube of skin floating through the ocean.
But many globsters have tentacles, strange arms, even hair. Can Waddell's theory explain these bizarre features?
Imagine the gnarliest piece of gristle you've ever encountered that's 100 feet long and a foot thick. It lasts essentially forever. It's only broken up, really, by getting pounded on rocks and torn apart by waves. That sack of skin can float around in the ocean for months or maybe even years. It can rip, it can tear, it can shred into all kinds of interesting shapes. And the collagen actually frays, just like an old pair of pants. And those threads of collagen that stick out are usually pink or red, and they look like hair.
Are globsters simply giant blobs of collagen floating around in a suit of whale skin? Or are they beasts from the deep?
I love a good mystery as much as the next person, and I would love to think that there are giant unknown animals in the ocean. And there probably are some new kinds of sharks and maybe even new species of whales, but there's no real sea monster. As much as I would like to believe that there is, I have to go where the evidence leads. And so far, all of the evidence that we have suggests that globsters are just the rotting skin of dead whales.
Are globsters simply masses of mammal meat? Some believe they are proof of something far more terrifying.
It would absolutely be a monster.
Strange creatures called globsters are washing up on beaches all over the world. Are they simply dead whales? Dr. Hans Larsson is a paleontologist. He thinks globsters could be a living relic from our ancient past.
The researchers who point to globsters and say they're nothing more than whales, they're probably right for most cases. But pretty much the entire ocean below 100 meters depth hasn't been explored.
Some areas of the ocean are over 6 miles deep. Larsson believes that a terrifying creature could be lurking in the depths. The megalodon.
Megalodon is a huge fish. It looks a lot like a great white shark, but it's much bigger.
It is known as the Tyrannosaurus rex of the deep, a monster that terrorized the ocean for 25 million years, and the right size for a globster.
This is a tiger shark, about 15 or so feet long. And look at the size of the teeth and the size of the mouth. So it's pretty impressive. I mean, this would be scary enough in the water should you be in front of it. But compare that to a megalodon, and this is an average size tooth. It would absolutely be a monster.
Most scientists believe this marine monster became extinct 1.5 million years ago. But remarkably, Larson isn't so sure.
Some people have suggested that the cooling of the oceans may have driven Megalodon to extinction. I think we should be a little bit skeptical about that because all the other animals in the ocean survive quite well. And if that whole ecosystem could survive the global cooling of the oceans and the ice ages, why not Megalodon?
Could science be wrong? Another giant of the deep, the coelacanth, was supposed to have died out 65 million years ago with the dinosaurs. But then in 1938, a fisherman hauled one up. Are megalodons alive? Could globsters be washed up remains of a 25-million-year-old living fossil?
We have glimpses of some other fishes down there, other sharks and other non-shark fishes, but we know practically nothing about them. I think that world is just unexplored. If the megalodon was one animal down there that we didn't know about, there could be a huge range of other animals as well, non-air breathing animals. Things like other squids, other fishes, both sharks and non-shark fishes, other invertebrates. Who knows what other kinds of crab-like animals or arthropods or jellyfish animals are down there. We just have no clue.
Do giant killers lurk in our oceans? Are they monsters of the deep, or just globs of super-strength blubber? Weird or what? In India, a rampaging man-beast causes widespread panic in the nation's capital.
They scream and cry and run off. You know, it was absolute panic.
Are scientists creating man-made monsters?
You know, when it comes to trying to prove there's no such thing as monsters, there's one big problem. There's just no hard evidence. They never seem to hang around long enough. But what if we're looking in the wrong places? What if instead of creepy shadows or deep, dark corners of our imagination, the monsters we're looking for are right under our noses? What if we're the ones creating them?
Sanal Damaruku is a journalist. He was in Delhi in the summer of 2001 and witnessed one of the most bizarre events in its long history.
It became very, very warm. The temperatures went up to 48 degrees Celsius with enormous humidity, which made life unbearable. Nobody could sleep in home, especially the poor section of the town. A lot of people have been sleeping on the rooftop.
As thousands of people try to escape the heat, they have no idea a 6-week reign of terror is about to begin.
2 factory workers said that they have been sleeping on the factory balcony in the evening, and suddenly some strange creature jumped from the floor to the second floor and scratched them, attacked them, screamed, and went off.
In a city home to thousands of monkeys, at first the attack seemed unremarkable, until the victims described what they had seen.
And they said that it had 2-3 special things: metallic claws, then a special light coming from its forehead, one green and the other red. And these lights were moving, and it scratched, made a special whistling sound, and disappeared. The story was like a wildfire. It spread everywhere. People have been speaking about this special creature.
What had attacked the workers? Within 24 hours, the newspapers give the creature a name: the Monkey Man. The very next night, it strikes again. By the end of the week, there are reports of a dozen more attacks.
People were so afraid. People ran off in absolute panic. They just were fleeing from the scene. They scream and cry, and hearing this sound, people shut off the windows, close lights. You know, it was absolute panic.
All the victims described the same thing: a hairy creature with metallic claws and strange lights.
Everybody has been speaking about the special kind of movement that it has, as if it's controlled by somebody. Some people said that it could be a half-man, half-robot, and especially created by the neighboring country, Pakistan, to make trouble in India.
But then comes a new twist. As rumors grow, so does the panic. Just 2 weeks after the first sighting of the Monkey Man, the entire city of New Delhi is besieged by terror.
So many people have been injured. Initially, every night, we had 5 to 6 people got attacked by the Monkey Man with scratches, bruises, and other body damages. And the number increased. Later, per night, there have been 120, 130, people got attacked by the Monkey Man. And there have been more than 800 people hospitalized at different parts of the time.
Then, tragedy strikes.
One lady was on a rooftop sleeping, and someone saw the Monkey Man, screamed, and the whole people started running off. She had been running off. And she fallen down from the second floor, straight down, hitting the floor, and she died.
In the following days, more people die as crowds rush to escape. As panic grows, New Delhi becomes a ghost town.
People were so afraid to come out. The Delhi streets were completely empty after 8 o'clock. Totally empty. Not even a car would go out. The whole city was completely afraid of Monkey Man.
Then, just as the terror reaches its peak, the incredible happens.
There was no Monkey Man reported anywhere after 3rd or 4th week of May, and it simply disappeared.
What happened in New Delhi? Something held this giant city in its fearful grip for weeks. Was it a monster? Could the Monkey Man be real? Jay Lakhani is a teacher of the Hindu religion. He believes the Monkey Man can be explained by Indian culture.
There is nothing here that would make me feel that there's anything more than superstition, kind of rolled up with fear and rolled up with this idea of religious iconography, which just kind of produced this story.
Lakhani thinks that powerful religious beliefs could have helped create the Monkey Man.
In the Hindu tradition, the word avatar is very central. Avatar means one who descends. The Hindus say the spirit has a habit of descending to earth in human form.
In the Hindu religion, gods known as avatars are believed to descend to earth in times of need. Many are depicted as part human, part animal. Was the Monkey Man a well-meaning avatar that was mistaken for something evil?
India is a poor country struggling with lots of issues, so it's understandable the public would like to project the idea that an avatar is here to rescue them. Any sober Hindu, when he looks at the story in a very sober manner, will immediately come to the conclusion that this was not an avatar. It's not just my take on it, but every sober Hindu, no sober Hindu would really consider this to be an avatar, because there is nothing that the monkey has done which in a way reflects what an avatar is all about, which is to benefit humanity, not frighten it. You see, a lay person is very, very gullible. I suspect it is quite possible that a few pranksters got together, dressed up a couple of monkeys, and had set them loose on the streets of New Delhi. But for a lay person who is kind of steeped in religious tradition, it is understandable that suddenly when he sees a few pranksters, he somehow projects his own idea that this is an avatar on the streets of New Delhi.
Were thousands of New Delhi residents victims of pranks blown out of proportion by widely held religious beliefs? Did the Monkey Man exist at all?
I don't think the Monkey Man existed at all. I think all these things combined with a few real monkeys kind of jumping about and perhaps some pranksters getting onto the act is the reason why we have got this story developing in India as an avatar coming down to earth.
So is that the end of this mystery? Maybe not. Could Monkey Man be a product of the human imagination in a different way? Not a religiously inspired delusion, but a manifestation of the dark side of science. Recently declassified documents hint at some kind of twisted Soviet genetic experiment. Was the Monkey Man a secret weapon that escaped the evil lab of a mad scientist that spawned him? Is that weird? Or what?
In New Delhi, thousands of people claim to have been attacked by a metal-clawed monster known as the Monkey Man. Was it simply mass hysteria? Or religious superstition? Scott Marlowe is a cryptozoologist with a remarkable theory.
I believe monsters exist. They may not necessarily be the Saturday or Friday night movie version of the monsters that terrify us on the silver screen, but there are things out there that go bump in the night that are terrifying, to say the least. When I first heard the story of India's Monkey Man, I was pretty certain I knew exactly what it was.
Marlowe's theory is controversial and alarming. He thinks the Monkey Man is a real-life monster created by us.
Monsters exist, and we certainly have the ability now with genetic engineering to create them. Based on some of the descriptions, there's a distinct possibility that monkey men could be some kind of human-ape hybrid.
Could someone have created a creature half man, half ape? And if so, why? Incredibly, this concept isn't as weird as it sounds. It could even be based in fact. Declassified Russian military files have allegedly revealed that in the 1920s, Joseph Stalin secretly tried to create a super soldier.
The super soldier is a genetically engineered creature that is designed with a military purpose in mind. Stalin commissioned a scientist to attempt a hybridization who went to Africa, collected ape DNA, and then attempted to impregnate human women with the sperm of these chimps that he collected the material from. They were trying to create a soldier that had superhuman strength. They wanted the strength of an ape, which is known to be about 7 times that of a human, with the intelligence of a human.
Incredibly, Marlowe believes Stalin wasn't the only one who was messing with nature.
Not to be outdone by the Russians, we attempted to do the same thing. The attempt was not successful by all accounts, but a lot of that had to do with the lack of knowledge on the genetics. Today, it could probably be done.
Are scientists using modern technology to create super soldiers from humans and apes? Could this explain the Monkey Man?
Some of the evidence that the Monkey Man is a human-ape hybrid could be that they are frequently reported wearing some sort of helmet or flashing lights and that kind of thing, which would probably be some sort of communications device. The most alarming feature that's reported are metal claws. That seems more of a military weapon. If such experimentation were going on and these creatures were intelligent enough, as presumably they would be, to escape from the facility that was creating them, they could certainly account for the monkey men.
Was the Monkey Man an escaped super soldier? And why, in an age of predator drones and nuclear bombs, would India need one?
Creating a super soldier using hybridization genetics would probably be a good solution for a country like India, where, yeah, they belong to the nuclear club, but it's not a very popular solution to solving one's problems as a country. A super soldier might be engineered for stealth purposes. They could pursue this type of a thing especially since in India, monkeys and apes running around are not at all unusual. They could infiltrate, they could blend in, they could perform a number of different things in terms of intelligence gathering or otherwise performing some sort of military function without going detected. I do know if monkey men had been created with genetic engineering for a military purpose, I would be extremely concerned, if not deathly afraid, of the outcome.
Was a hybrid man-ape let loose on the streets of New Delhi? Are we creating man-made monsters? Weird, or what? So there we have it. Monster stories from all over the world. In West Virginia, a winged monster 7 feet tall with red eyes terrorizes the town of Point Pleasant. In Newfoundland, a mysterious giant mass of flesh emerges from the depths of the ocean. And in India, a half-man, half-beast attacks thousands and sends an entire city into panic. Are these bizarre stories evidence that monsters exist? Can we dismiss thousands of eyewitnesses who claim these things are true? You decide.
Join me again next time for more stories that will undoubtedly be weird or what? You know, I've been around for a while, met some interesting people, done some crazy things. So you just might think that there's not much that can take me by surprise. You'd be wrong. The world is full of stories, science and things that amaze and confound me. Every single day, incredible mysteries that keep me awake at night. Some I can answer. Others just defy logic.
Does the human body contain inexplicable mysteries beyond the reach of medical science? In Arkansas, a skydiver plummets to the earth from over 11,000 feet and somehow survives. How? In New York, a man is vaporized as he lies in bed. Can humans spontaneously combust?
I've been to fires before too, and nothing like that.
And in England, a young girl becomes supercharged with electricity. Is she a walking power grid?
She wouldn't touch me if she was switching the light switch on because a jolt of electricity would go through her.
Yeah. It's a weird world, and I love it. The human body. Remarkable, isn't it? Well, this one is anyway. Just a candid shot of me at the beach. But this is what we all look like underneath. Unless you believe in reincarnation, we only get one of these. But do we really appreciate just how incredible these things that carry us around are, or do we take them for granted? You see, many believe we're much more than just skin and bones. That there's things going on inside us that modern medicine may never be able to explain. Is it true? Do you think they can help me with my indigestion?
October 9th, 2005. Siloam Springs, Arkansas.
Hi, what's your name?
You know my name.
Adrenaline junkie Shayna Richardson, 21, is about to attempt her first solo skydive.
All right, Shayna.
Shayna's husband, Rick West, was also her jump instructor.
I was very confident that, that she was well prepared for this.
Rick has a helmet camera
Hi, Shayna.
to capture Shayna's jump. Together, they will free fall from an altitude of 11,000 feet, more than 2 miles high. At first, things go great.
We exited the plane well, and she did a perfect dive.
Rick and Shayna are plummeting to Earth at terminal velocity, 120 miles per hour. After 30 seconds of free fall, Shayna pulls the ripcord.
And as you see in the video, I say,
Woo! Good job, Shayna. Yeah, girl.
and I had no idea at this time that she was in any kind of trouble until I look up.
What Rick sees fills him with horror. On her very first jump, his wife's main parachute has failed. Desperate, Shayna releases it and tries her reserve.
And then her reserve didn't work out so well.
Unable to help, Rick realizes he is watching what will be his wife's final moments.
Shayna is spinning out of control.
8,000 feet from the ground, Shayna's reserve parachute is tangled. She is now plummeting uncontrollably towards the ground at over 70 feet per second.
Panic sets in. She kept spinning and kept spinning and spinning. And the closer and closer we get, I'm seeing cars, semis, the road, buildings she was heading right into.
Helpless, Rick can only watch as Shayna spins towards certain death.
It was horrible for me. It was just a sickening feeling.
To Rick's horror, Shayna slams directly into a parking lot.
I was sure she was dead or gonna be dead really quick. And as soon as I landed, I turned the camera off, and I was just trying to get to her in time to tell her that I love her and I'm sorry. She was actually laying in a pool of blood. Her bottom lip had been busted, peeled out, split above her nose, was wide open. You could almost see the bone.
But something miraculous has happened.
I really did firmly believe that I was going to die.
Despite smashing into asphalt from a height of 2 miles, Shayna is somehow alive.
My face hit a split second before the rest of my body did. The doctors described my facial fractures as kind of an eggshell effect. I broke pretty much every bone in my face, my ocular sockets, my sinus cavity. I knocked out the front 5 teeth in my mouth, so they had to completely rebuild my face. I broke my pelvis in 3 places. I broke my right leg.
Shayna's doctors can't comprehend how she survived her fall, but then their jaws drop even lower. Shayna's not the only survivor.
The very first thing I remember hearing from the doctors was about the baby.
Unknown to both Shayna and Rick, she's pregnant. Miraculously, both mother and baby survive. Their son, Tanner, is now 5. Somehow, this remarkable story has a happy ending, but the doctors are still trying to figure it out.
The doctors in that hospital just said, this is amazing. This is a miracle. I don't understand.
So how are Shayna and her unborn child able to survive such an unbelievable fall? What had happened that saved their lives? Dr. Chris Hart is an expert in aviation accident investigation. He's extensively studied Shayna's accident and has reached a controversial conclusion.
I think the way she hit the ground is critically important for why she survived.
It's believed that Shayna face planted into the ground. But Hart disagrees.
Looking at the video, I don't believe she hit the ground face first. Clearly, she's at about a 45 to 60 degree angle. So when she finally makes contact with the ground, she contacts feet first, then legs, then side, and then finally head. The injuries to her pelvis and to her legs are very common when someone lands feet first. If it's a head first injury, you typically don't see those types of injuries.
Hart believes that the angle of Shayna's fall was critical to her survival, as it enabled her to inadvertently perform a skydiving safety technique.
I think just the laws of physics dictated that the way her body hit was very similar to a parachute landing fall. The parachute landing fall is a technique for improving the odds of surviving a hard landing without injury. The technique is essentially to distribute the force of impact over 5 body points. You start with contacting on the balls of the feet, and then the calves, then the thighs, then the hips, and then the side of the back. You can think of the parachute landing fall as almost being like a bumper on a car. The head is what you want to protect. The body acts as the shock absorber.
But what about the damage to Shayna's face? How could a successful parachute landing fall have resulted in such horrific injuries?
Even though she didn't hit face first, her body was traveling at a very high rate of speed. She sustained injuries to every part of her body that hit the ground. Her face was probably the last thing that hit the ground, but it was still moving fast enough to cause some pretty serious injuries. Given her lack of training, it's very fortunate that Shayna executed what was very similar to a parachute landing fall. Had she not done that, she almost certainly would have perished. She should consider herself very fortunate.
Did the accidental execution of the parachute landing fall save Shayna's life? Or is the explanation beyond the understanding of science?
She was exempt from the laws of gravity.
21-year-old Shayna Richardson experiences every skydiver's nightmare. When her parachutes fail, she slams into the ground from 11,000 feet. But amazingly, Shayna survives. How? Sophie Burnham is an author. She believes Shayna's survival was, quite literally, a miracle.
To me, her survival is incomprehensible, except by divine intervention. It had to be the hand of an angel. She was exempt from the laws of gravity.
We've all heard of angels, but let's just make sure we're on the same page as Sophie.
Angels are messengers of the divine, and they can come in any form. They come to the innocent, to people whose work is not yet finished on this plane of existence. Angels save people from possible death in any way that it can be done. Sometimes it's by deflecting a bullet, and sometimes it's by preventing a car accident. They can change all the physical laws of the universe.
No doubt they do good work, but how exactly did an angel save Shayna?
It is not difficult for me to believe that an angel carried Shayna down or broke her fall so that she would not fall as swiftly as she should have.
It's an interesting theory, but is it supported by scientific proof?
Lots of times, miracles occur with scientific explanations and are just as miraculous. I don't think that science and miracles are mutually exclusive. And I think that there is a spiritual dimension that we live in as fish live in water. I am sure that some people completely dismiss the idea that an angel could save Shayna's life. And I think it's very important for some people to believe that they are in control. We don't want to be so completely at the mercy of fate and fortune that there's nothing that we can do. I would not try to dissuade somebody from that position if it's important to him. But to me, I would need very, very strong proof of something that happened like she pulled a third parachute out and came down. I would need very strong scientific proof. I can't imagine what would have happened if an angel had not saved Shayna that day. There would have been her body splattered over the parking lot in a gory, bloody, disgusting, and horrible, horrible accident. It would have been ghastly.
Wow, this is incredible. Instead of being splattered all over the parking lot, Sophie thinks an angel swooped down at the last moment, somehow taking hold of Shayna, breaking her fall. Could this really be possible? Regardless of your beliefs, one has to admit that Shayna's story is, well, miraculous. But could a guardian angel have slowed Shayna's fall, sparing her life and the life of her unborn son? And if so, don't they deserve some thanks?
There is no evidence that guardian angels exist. There is no empirical evidence for it. Okay, it's just people trying to put meaning onto things they don't understand. You know, it's the 21st century, for goodness sake. We need to move on.
John Leach is a survival psychologist with the Norwegian Armed Forces. He believes the key to Shayna's survival lies in a theory that's far more down to earth.
If a person is falling without a parachute, after about 12 seconds, they'll reach the maximum rate of descent. And it doesn't matter how long they're falling for, they will stay at 120 miles an hour. If Shayna had hit the ground at normal terminal velocity of 120 miles an hour, she would have had a very small chance of surviving that, especially on the sort of ground that she hit. Now, there are cases of people who have survived from terminal velocity, but usually it's because they've gone into soft ground, they've gone into mud, they've gone into snow, they've gone into trees. So there's something that's actually decelerated their speed at the last minute.
But if her chances of surviving were so low, how is it that Shayna and Tanner are still with us?
You can see from the video that although the parachute was malfunctioning, it wasn't completely dysfunctional. In other words, it was still acting as a sort of parachute and providing a degree of drag. So instead of hitting the ground at 120 miles an hour, which is a terminal velocity for somebody traveling without a parachute, she hit the ground at 50 miles an hour according to the records.
Was Shayna's survival connected to how fast she hit the ground? Or did something else save her?
Age plays a role in survival for various reasons, and a number of studies involving analysis of, for example, road traffic accidents at different speeds shows that one of the best ages for surviving an impact at 50 miles an hour is Shayna's age, so somewhere between the late teens and early 20s.
For Leach, the final factor in Shayna's survival is the angle of impact, though with a very different take to Dr. Chris Hart.
I don't think we should be deploying any parachute landing technique. The parachute was moving her into a more horizontal position, and the injuries that she sustained is consistent with that type of impact on the ground. The fact that she hit the ground more or less horizontally rather than on her head or through her feet also increased her chances of survival.
For Leach, the combination of a partially effective parachute, Shayna's age, and landing almost flat to the ground is enough to leave her battered, but still breathing.
All these factors together all contribute to her chances of surviving. So there's nothing miraculous about it, it's straightforward physics.
I did jump one more time. When Tanner was 6 weeks old, I went and jumped again. I did a tandem jump. I landed, took my gear off, grabbed my son, and I haven't been back up. I love the sport, I love the thrill of it, but my kids give me a much greater thrill, and I don't have it in me anymore. I can't do it.
Can Shayna's remarkable survival be explained by physics? Or did divine intervention play a part? Was she saved by a higher power? Or did she just get lucky and deploy the parachute landing fall? For now, it will remain a head-scratcher that's most definitely weird. Oh, what? In upstate New York, a man is incinerated in his own bed. With no plausible explanation, investigators are left with a terrifying question. Can we spontaneously combust?
When someone is cremated, there's probably more remains after that cremation than there was at this incident.
You know, fire is a wonderful thing. We've harnessed its power in so many ways we'd be lost without it. It does everything from keeping us warm to one of my favorites, cooking up a storm. Well, that's, if you can get it started, of course. The thing about fire is, as well as being our friend, it can be our worst enemy. Does anyone smell anything that,
In 1986, college student Ray Harlan was visiting his father, Jack, a coroner in New York State, when the phone rang. It would lead them on the most mysterious and bizarre journey of their lives.
My dad owns a local funeral home, and he was also the county coroner. They just said that there was an unattended death, and one of us always went with them to help them with removals.
The deceased is a 58-year-old retired fireman, George Mott. When Ray and Jack arrive at Mott's house, everything seems normal.
It was just a typical home in the back roads of the Adirondacks.
But nothing has prepared the Harlans for what they find inside.
The first words out of the state trooper's mouth to my dad was, I don't think you're going to need your stretcher for this one.
Entering the house, Ray and Jack notice something that tells them this is no ordinary death.
There was a thin black film covering everything. It was like a dust powder. It was strange because it looked like there was a fire, but there was nothing really charred.
Where is George Mott? As they move deeper into the house, they're about to make a shocking discovery.
When we walked into the bedroom, you could see where Mr. Mott was laying. In my lifetime growing up in the funeral home, I've probably seen over 1,000 bodies in various conditions. And I've been to fires before too, and nothing like that. There was a perfect outline of his body burned into the mattress. And the only thing that was left of him was his head, a few ribs, and his right foot. Everything else was gone.
What happened to George Mott? The charred remains suggest he died in a fire, but this was no ordinary blaze.
Usually in a fire, instead the whole body remains, you never see parts of the body missing. To put it in perspective, when someone is cremated for 5 to 6, sometimes 7 hours, there's probably more remains after that cremation than there was at this incident.
It's a baffling and gruesome mystery. George Mott has been incinerated to a fine powder, but somehow the objects around him are not even singed, including a canister of matches only inches away. But how? Remarkably, all over Mott's house, there is evidence that this was a fire unlike any other.
Everything plastic was melted. The casing on the TV was distorted, and the telephone was melted to a ball of plastic.
It's an incredible puzzle. What sort of heat or fire could vaporize a man and melt plastic but not burn the house down?
The fireman thought it was a gas leak underneath his bed, but if it was a gas leak and it was fire, there would have been a lot more burning. They'd never found a gas leak.
It's left to Ray to offer a theory.
I mentioned human spontaneous combustion, and everybody looked at me like I was crazy.
Spontaneous human combustion, or SHC, is a bizarre and weird phenomenon in which a person instantly bursts into flames for no apparent reason. Amazingly, there have been 40 other cases of SHC documented in the last century.
To that point, I don't think anybody in that room has heard of it. And everybody almost had the same reaction. Spontaneous combustion, what is that?
The investigation into George Mott's death failed to reach a conclusion, but Ray Harlan has no doubt what happened.
I still believe that it was spontaneous combustion because there's no other explanation. This is what I saw.
Now, this is weird or what? I mean, we know heavy metal rock drummers spontaneously combust all the time, but an innocent, harmless man minding his own business in bed and then poof, he goes up in smoke. I mean, what's going on here? Are any of us safe? Oh no, not again! Was George Mott a victim of SHC? Can a human simply ignite and burn without any external cause?
Spontaneous human combustion is amazing, bizarre, horrific. Given all that, it still happens.
A man is incinerated by a bizarre, inexplicable fire. Is his death proof that people can just spontaneously catch fire?
We have spent more than 3 decades looking at this incredibly weird phenomenon, and our conclusion is absolutely categorically, yes, it does happen.
Larry Arnold is a writer. He's dedicated himself to the study of SHC. He came to the scene of the George Mott conflagration.
To be at the scene of one of these remarkably rare and phenomenal events is eerie. It's unearthly. We look at the person who used to be there, and we're looking at something burned more completely than after several hours at several thousand degrees Fahrenheit. The George Mott fire scene is incredibly complex and very puzzling, even to someone such as ourselves who has looked at scores of cases that seem to emulate the kind of fire that consumed Mr. Mott. Something burned up Mr. Mott more completely than can be accomplished in a crematorium. His body burned through his bed, actually pushed the mattress springs into a V, burned through the boarding underneath the mattress, burned through the floorboards, and into a crawl space below. There is no heat or flame damage directly above the point of combustion that consumed Mr. Mott. We could touch the ceiling. It was about 7.5 feet high. Not a scorch mark of any kind on the ceiling directly above the point of combustion. In most fires, heat rises. We would expect to see a lot of heat and flame damage above the bed. Zero. Throughout the house, there was a nonsensical pattern of melted plastics or not melted plastics. It's baffling to us to this day, and we spent a lot of hours, as did the county officials, investigating this fire scene.
But if Mott self-immolated, how did it happen? Arnold believes the answer can be found in something so tiny, we can't even see it.
We wondered how much energy it takes to cremate someone like George Mott in the natural conditions, and if there could be a particle that would have that amount of energy contained within it. So we pulled up a theory from quantum physics, crunched the numbers. You come up with a particle that is incredibly small, much smaller than an atom, but it has an energy level which is humongous.
Arnold calls these subatomic particles pyrotrons. He believes they may be tiny, but they pack a punch.
It's so small that it can pass through three-dimensional matter almost unimpeded, perhaps through galaxies without ever striking something.
But according to Arnold, when the pyrotron does connect with something physical, the results are catastrophic.
On rare occasion, luck runs out, happenstance happens, and in those conditions, when the pyrotron, with its incredibly high energy, impacts something inside a human being, we posit the end result is spontaneous human combustion. In essence, a human Hiroshima effect, a thermonuclear explosion, if you will, in the body.
Is spontaneous human combustion the result of a pyrotron colliding with a particle inside the human body? Did George Mott die from a freak collision of physics?
There simply is no plausible way by any chemical mechanism known that the body could just suddenly burst into flames and proceed to be destroyed.
Joe Nickel is an investigator of the paranormal and a firm believer that spontaneous human combustion is a myth with a rational explanation.
I looked at 30 historical cases from the 18th century throughout the 20th century. And in every case, I could find a plausible source for the ignition. For example, the famous case in America of Mary Reeser in 1951 in St. Petersburg, Florida. She burned up in a very unusual way. It's sort of one of the classic cases. But when she was last seen, and this is left out of some of the stories, she was wearing flammable night clothes, sitting in a big stuffed chair, smoking a cigarette, having taken 2 Seconal sleeping tablets, and planned to take 2 more sleeping tablets before going to bed because she was having trouble sleeping. Now, it's kind of a no-brainer to suggest that she caught on fire by dozing off and dropping her cigarette. Yes, there are other mysteries. Why did her body burn so thoroughly, and why were nearby objects? We take those one at a time. And in these cases, you can't just have a sort of simple-minded, one-size-fits-all explanation and say, oh yeah, that's just this. No, you have to actually look at the facts in a particular case and look at the physics, because there are no two quite alike. The most logical explanation for the George Mott fire was a canister of matches sitting on, of all places, his oxygen enricher unit. He had either been somewhere to light a stove or something, and a spark could have gotten onto his clothes.
But how could a spark or a cigarette burn a human body to the extent seen in SHC cases?
In the forensic literature is something known as the wick effect. And that is, if you think of a wick in a candle, the wick is not doing much burning. The wick is simply a conduit. Now, if you think of the human body as sort of a candle inside out, the body has a lot of fat. It's very flammable.
Sounds horrific. How can someone become a human candle?
The clothing acts as a kind of wick in which once the body begins to burn, that body fat can be absorbed by clothing, mattress, and that begins this cyclical process in which the body burns, releasing more body fat to destroy still more of the body, to release more. It's the wick effect that's helping this burn in a very efficient way. There's never a big fire when the body burns in this way. It's not a huge inferno. The results afterwards may look like that's what happened, but what actually happened is just that the body burned very slowly and very efficiently where the body fat was, in the torso, the upper thighs. You'll often find limbs or body parts that are not burned for pretty obvious reasons. They don't have as much body fat. Even a lean person has a significant amount of body fat. So while this isn't an explanation for all burning deaths, it's a relevant factor in some of the unusual cases because it can explain why, over a period of several hours, a fire is progressing and attacking and burning a body which is actually supplying the fuel for its own destruction.
But if your clothes catch fire, you simply put them out, right?
In some cases, the person may have had a seizure or a heart attack. In other cases, they may have been lying asleep and smoldering material near them first started burning, creating a lot of smoke. They may have died of smoke inhalation and never woken up.
Nickel believes that his theory can explain the almost complete lack of fire damage around the body.
Since there's never a big fire here, nearby objects are not going to be burned. Just as you can sit just inches away from a campfire and toast a marshmallow and not be burned, the same is true with this wick effect.
But does this explain the other objects that were melted throughout George's house?
The heat, of course, is gathering and rising. Objects above a certain line will be melted because the heat is accumulated there. And in the Mott case, there was soot all over. There's usually a sooty deposit if there's a lot of organic material being burned.
For Nickel, the answer is clear.
If science knows anything about spontaneous human combustion, it is that it doesn't exist. It's difficult to prove a negative, but we don't have to. There just is no evidence. It is To say it's unlikely does not do justice to how very, very, very far-fetched this idea is. The George Mott case was a mystery. I would consider it basically a mystery solved.
Does Nichols' theory prove that SHC does not exist? Can these horrific deaths be explained by the Wick effect?
We've tried to conduct those experiments ourselves. We know others in the forensics field who have done so. They can't replicate these fire scenes under controlled scientific conditions. It doesn't work for us, and it did not work for the local investigators in Essex County. This is an example of individuals making up facts, creating stories, generating hypotheses without foundation to explain away something that they don't otherwise want to confront. Spontaneous human combustion is amazing, bizarre, horrific. Given all that, it still happens.
So is spontaneous human combustion real? It's a debate that will continue to rage. One thing we do know for certain, though, it's definitely weird. Or what? A British woman reports an ability that defies science. Can she harness electrical power?
The possibilities of things going wrong are just mind-blowingly frightening.
You know, when it comes to medicine, there's very little modern science can't explain. Oh my God! What is that disgusting thing in there? Oh. Sometimes we come across things that are not only inexplicable, they send a shiver down your spine. Or in the case of our next story, 1,000,000 volts through your hand. Whoa! Weird? Oh! Or what? Growing up in London, England, Debbie Wolfe thought she was a normal child.
I think when you're a small child, you don't realise you're different from anyone else. But my mum got it pretty quickly, I think.
Shortly after Debbie turned 4, her mother noticed there was something rather unusual about her daughter.
My mum noticed like hot spots of problems. It was just the era of everyone had Walkmans, and I drained the batteries, and light bulbs seemed to be quite vulnerable. My mum wouldn't touch me if she was switching the light switch on because a jolt of electricity would go through her.
Incredibly, it seems this tiny girl had somehow become supercharged with electricity. But what could cause this weird phenomenon? For Debbie and her family, it's just the start of a bizarre and literally shocking ordeal.
Every time I walked past the telly, the channels would start changing. The volume would go up or down, or it would switch off. I was always excluded from the lounge when the football was on because my dad didn't want me changing the channels.
Incredibly, when Debbie interacts with anything electrical, havoc ensues. She fries appliances, drains batteries, and explodes light bulbs. And as she gets older, the condition gets worse.
There's one particular occasion that I remember. I can't have been more than about 6. We went to this shop, one of my mum's favourite shops, and as we went past each street light, it went off and on and off and on as we passed them.
Remarkably, Debbie's electrical power grows with every step. By the time they arrive at the shop, things are getting out of control.
They had these metal rails where the clothes were displayed, and for some reason that seemed to spark me. So much so that I could touch it and you'd see sparks and you'd hear the crack of the spark. So my mum tried to herd me away from that.
But her mum doesn't act fast enough. Debbie's touch electrifies the entire store, blowing the fuses and plunging it into complete darkness. Terrified of her young child's weird power, Debbie's mum rushes her from the shop.
My mum made rules about what I was allowed to do and not allowed to do because it was disruptive.
What happened to Debbie Wolfe? Could she be cured by medicine? Or did she need an electrician? Sadly, her condition hasn't gone away. Over 3 decades later, she is still suffering.
I affected everything. I lost a job in a nightclub because every time I walked past the DJ box, the music would go off. My house is just like a graveyard of electrical goods. And I've usually got a TV or something sitting in my drive waiting to be taken to the dump. I get through an extraordinary amount of kettles and toasters and TVs. So I tend to buy second-hand TVs. And it is expensive and inconvenient, and I'm not always welcome in people's houses. I don't know from day to day what's going to work and what isn't, which is quite annoying when the fridge is defrosting in the morning. So basically, my house is just, you know, on a short lifespan. The thing I hate most to do, but I have to do it anyway, is flying. I just hate flying. The fear of being able to stop a plane in midair and having it drop out of the sky. No, because the possibilities of things going wrong are just mind-blowingly frightening.
Is Debbie somehow generating lethal amounts of electricity? If so, how and why? Incredibly, she isn't the only one suffering from this bizarre affliction. Thousands of others have it too, and it's even been given a name. Street light interference syndrome. Those who have it are called sliders. Water sliders, and where do they get their supercharged powers? Are they a threat to themselves or even us? Bill Beatty is an electrical engineer. He thinks he can explain sliders.
I first heard about this in the 80s, and I started wondering, are they some kind of electric generator?
Could sliders like Debbie actually be generating their own electricity? How could she do it? Beatty thinks her power could be an extension of something we've all experienced.
If you scuff on the rug and touch a doorknob and you hear that little click, that's static electricity. The effect is caused by your body being charged.
Rubbing your feet steals negatively charged electrons from the carpet. With each step, you steal more electrons and develop more of a negative charge. Something easily detected with a voltmeter.
If I scuff on the rug, watch what happens. I'm scuffing my shoe. Oh, and they're all turning on and off. This is me moving my shoe up and down on the carpet. There's some more over there. So a science fair project for kids, a little transistor voltage detector. So if you were an electric human, you wouldn't have to scuff on the carpet. So if I could stand perfectly still and wait for long enough for my charge to go away, oh, it's gone again. So it already leaked away here. I would be turning the light on and off if my body charged up by itself. So I'm not an electric human, oh well.
But could this build up enough charge to affect a streetlight? Beatty believes sliders could generate large amounts of static electricity in another way.
Well, there's one thing that humans do which might explain this, and that's breathing.
Every day, humans take over 25,000 breaths. Remarkably, Beatty thinks it's possible we can steal a few electrons from the air each time we breathe in, and eventually supercharge our bodies.
If you can charge your body up by breathing, you have this invisible field of voltage around your body that can affect electronic devices, even from a few feet away.
But if everyone breathes air, why would only a few people, like Debbie, turn into human lightning bugs?
There's a chance that it could be a virus that hasn't been discovered yet. There are a few viruses that they're not like the flu or colds. Instead, when you catch it, there's almost no change, and then your body easily fights it off. If it's communicable, then you'd think that there'd be lots of electric humans, or you'd get it for a while and then it would be gone again. But this sounds more like it might be something that's like a symbiotic thing, that maybe you're born with it and you can't give it to other people.
could some yet-to-be-discovered virus alter the lungs of sliders just enough to strip electrons from the air and turn them into supercharged humans? Or is Beatty's theory a few connections short of a circuit?
Oh, I was attracted to it because it's weird, but the vast, unstudied collection of weird things, some of those are real, and those are Nobel Prize discoveries.
So let me get this right. Sliders have an innate ability to wreak havoc on electrical goods, especially streetlights, right? And one guy thinks the reason they can do this is there's a virus going around that can supercharge your body as you breathe. Nothing. Can't we come up with a better explanation? I mean, when it comes to electrical faults, isn't it just a matter of some dummy doing something stupid?
So do sliders really have the power to generate electricity?
The phenomenon, to me, is not a real phenomenon at all.
Around the world, hundreds of people known as sliders claim to have the ability to interfere with electricity. Do they have a science-baffling superpower? Lee Colville has studied sliders for 5 years. He thinks he's found another way to explain the phenomenon.
It's highly improbable that anyone can generate enough electricity to affect a street lamp. We're talking about millions of volts here, as with a lightning bolt, and obviously a very high current flow. I mean, basically, if anyone could generate that amount of electricity, I mean, they would kill them. You know, the current flow itself would kill them and probably fry them, and they'd be blowing cars up and all sorts all over the place. You know, you don't see that, so therefore it's very unlikely. The most plausible explanation to me is basically pure coincidence.
But how could pure chance explain the incredible effect sliders have over electrical devices like street lamps?
Most people are not aware of how the streetlight works or what happens when the streetlight malfunctions. Here we have a common example of a street lamp, which is a high-pressure sodium lamp.
Many streetlights use powerful sodium light bulbs. When they get old, they don't just burn out or even flicker like fluorescent bulbs. Instead, they begin a process called cycling.
It will turn off. When it cools down, it will basically come on again. Obviously, it will get too hot, then it will cool down again, come back on again, cycling on and off periodically.
If someone walked under a cycling street lamp at just the right moment, they could think they turned it on. But what about Debbie Wolf? She made a whole street go haywire.
A row of lamps that was probably installed at the same time, so the chances are that if one is faulty, you're going to find another one that's faulty along the same row.
Do faulty streetlights explain this mystery? What about all the other electrical gadgets that sliders like Deborah destroy?
Static electricity, it's mundane as that. If you've got someone with very dry skin, you could build up quite a large voltage, and by touching any electrical appliance, it could discharge and cause damage to sensitive components.
Are sliders just mistaking static electricity and coincidence for superpowers?
There's no reason to be frightened of spending time around a ledge slider, because the phenomena, to me, is not a real phenomena at all.
So, is this the end of the mystery? Maybe not. Suan Jaising is a mechanical engineer who was intrigued by Debbie's story.
A person being able to produce energy or harness energy is much like the X-Men, so it kind of provoked my interest.
He's come up with a remarkable new theory to explain what is happening.
I'm a bit skeptical that the body alone can generate enough energy to knock off electrical streetlights. But Debbie's body could absorb energy from around us and release it in the form of an electrical pulse.
Instead of creating electrical energy, could Debbie actually be sucking it up from the world around her?
Electricity plays quite an important role in our human body. Theoretically, one could possess the ability to store electricity through their bodies, just like a capacitor.
Capacitors are common in all electronics. They are used to gradually soak up excess electricity and then discharge it in a flash. Could Debbie could be a human capacitor.
Her body may possess molecules that are able to harness this power.
To prove his theory, Jae-sing has conducted tests designed to try and stimulate Debbie into releasing an electrical charge. Using an oscilloscope, an instrument which measures voltage, he compares her output to someone with a normal charge.
And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some images, see whether we are able to simulate some electricity. Okay?
Debbie seems to become most electric when she's excited or stressed. Jae-sing uses images he hopes will recreate those feelings. Although not conclusive, some of Jae-sing's experiments have produced surprising results.
With Debbie, we noticed that there was voltage that was being measured from her body that was different to what could be measured from ours. So the slider phenomenon does exist.
But this phenomenon isn't something Debbie can turn on and off at will.
It's very hard to bring myself to a place where I'm going to be electric, I suppose. I mean, I'd be a much richer person if I could do circus tricks, and I can't. It just happens.
Are Debbie and thousands like her really able to store electricity and release it in a flash? Could a rare virus have turned them into human generators? Or could it all be just a series of shocking coincidences? Whatever the answer, it's most definitely weird. Or what? So there we have it. 3 bizarre medical mysteries. An Arkansas woman baffles medical professionals by surviving a horrific skydiving accident. In upstate New York, a man vaporized in a fire leaves investigators asking, can humans spontaneously combust? And a group of people report being able to interfere with electricity. Do they have an inexplicable superpower? You decide.
Join me again next time for more stories that will undoubtedly be weird or